Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 271. Spirit Possession. In a daze, Qin Mu felt someone climbing up his body. He had quite a temper while asleep, and thus he gave 2 kicks and kicked that person off the bed. That person was also in a daze and climbed back onto the bed while pulling on the blanket, snuggling up to his chest. However, she was kicked down by Qin Mu once again. In the end, the 3 girls huddled up together to sleep, leaving Qin Mu alone on the other side. The last few days of hard work had resulted in Qin Mu and Ling Yuxiu falling into a deep sleep. When Qin Mu woke up the next morning, Ling Yuxiu had snuggled herself under his arm. To get up, he carefully shifted his arm, afraid of waking her up. Actually, Ling Yuxiu had already woken up, but she was a thin-skinned girl. She was afraid things would be awkward when she woke up, so she pretended to sleep. When he had gotten up, she secretly opened her eyes and saw him grabbing his shoes and tiptoeing out of the room. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief after walking out of the room. The twin sisters had woken up earlier and were talking in the courtyard. One of them said, "Young Master Qin likes to punch around in his sleep. He gave me a good beating. Just look at my swollen eye. Not only that, I got kicked on the chest and pushed off the bed. Did he take advantage of you? Not even once. However, how are we supposed to report that the princess and young master were sleeping together, and even we were on the same bed, sharing a blanket?" The 2 girls stayed silent for a moment, then said in unison, "We won't. Young master and princess won't speak of it, so it's best not to say anything. In regards to the face of the imperial family, saying too much would result in being executed." The girls naturally knew that, and that's why they had made the decision to keep their silence. Qin Mu put on his shoes and walked out with a cough. The 2 palace maids immediately greeted him. "Young master is awake? Us sisters were rude and impetuous yesterday. Luckily, with young master's care, we didn't lose our lives to Little Poison King." Qin Mu returned the greeting and said, "Luckily the 2 big sisters were there and injured Little Poison King, preventing him from being impudent." The 2 palace maids looked at each other and laughed in unison. "Young master, don't call us big sisters. We serve Empress Dowager and don't even have a surname, only a name. I'm called Jianqi, and she's called Qinqi." The 2 palace maids couldn't help laughing when they saw him sizing up the both of them to differentiate who was Jianqi and who was Qinqi. With this laugh, Qin Mu noticed it that Jianqi had a small canine tooth on her left while Qinqi had a small canine tooth on her right. "Young master, we haven't returned for the whole night, so we have to come back to the palace earlier to report on the completion of our mission," Qinqi said. Qin Mu nodded and said, "After a night's sleep, the remaining poison in your bodies should have been detoxified, so there shouldn't be any problems. Still, I have some detoxing pellets with me, so you 2 can take them." The 2 palace maids gave their thanks and received the detoxing pellets. They were about to leave when Ling Yuxiu's voice came from the room. "Wait for me. I shall go back with the 2 of you." The 2 women stopped and looked back to see Ling Yuxiu running over at them in a panic. Her clothes disheveled, her white undercoat askew. Her beautiful hair was also messy, and she was rushing with her outer clothing clasped under her arm and dragging her shoes out with her feet. When she dropped them behind, she immediately lifted her feet up to get the shoes up, but her jet black hair completely scattered, flowing down her shoulders like a waterfall. She wanted to take control of her hair, but then the outer clothing she was clasping fell down. She cut a very sorry figure. Qin Mu looked at her and saw a plump chest that was about to run out from her clothing. The youth's heart then wavered, and he didn't know whether to warn her or go forward to help her stuff them back in. Jianqi and Qinqi looked at each other and walked forward to escort the princess back into the room to help her dress and groom herself. Ling Yuxiu's cheeks turned red from embarrassment, and she collected her courage to ask them softly, "Will I get pregnant?" The 2 palace maids stared with their eyes wide open and asked in astonishment, "Why did princess say that?" "I've heard from people in the palace saying that when a male and female sleep together, the female will get pregnant," Ling Yuxiu said seriously. "We slept together for almost a whole day and night, so I might just be pregnant. Jianqi burst out laughing. Princess, you're mistaken. It's not like that. I can't explain it to you clearly, but the young master is a divine physician, so he definitely has ways to prevent pregnancy. Ling Yuxiu opened her eyes wide. That's possible? Isn't that so? I've heard some rich madams who don't want to give birth look for apothecaries to prescribe them medicine so they won't get pregnant. Qin Mu sent the 3 women off and noticed that the pear blossoms on the yellow pear tree had blossomed, filling the entire tree with their blooms. Spring is finally here. He thought to himself, when the grains of the first season mature, this year of disaster will finally be over. He washed up, and since there was only the dragon Qilin accompanying him, he didn't have the intention to cook and just went down the mountain to eat. When he walked out of his courtyard, he saw Chancellor Ba Shan walking over in a shirt. With a loud voice, he said, I saw the princess and 2 palace maids carrying lanterns down the mountain. Could they have come from your room? Senior brother, don't say nonsense when you have no evidence, Qin Mu said with a normal face and heartbeat. Did senior brother come to find me regarding Pangongtso? Have you had breakfast? Chancellor Ba Shan was a loudmouth no inferior to Duke Wei. If the incident regarding Ling Yuxiu and the 2 palace maids sleeping in Qin Mu's room for a night were found out by him, the entire capital would know about it. To Qin Mu, it started with emotion and stopped with politeness. He hadn't done anything out of line, but this was no small matter to the secular people. If news of him sleeping with the princess spread, the emperor would execute him, so it was best to hide it. I just ate below. Knowing that you had just come back from the palace and must be hungry after being exhausted for such a long time, I brought some food for you. Chancellor Ba Shan took out a couple oil paper packets, and Qin Mu took them from him with thanks. When he opened the paper packets, he saw a tray of steamed stuffed buns, some kind of strange beast's meat which was cooked with clear water, a red sauce made with fermented flour mixed with finely chopped spring onions and salted vegetables. Qin Mu invited him into the house to sit down and eat. Chancellor Ba Shan looked at him gorging himself and sighed ruefully. The emperor is really stingy, not preparing anything good for you to eat when you were there to treat him. That's right. Pangongtso's 6 Directions divine treasure is already halfway through his wall break. So fast. Qin Mu raised his head and revealed an expression of astonishment. One would become a divine arts practitioner by cultivating to 6 Directions realm. During one's cultivation, any one of the realms required fine grinding, so someone like Qin Mu breaking the walls of 5 elements divine treasure in 2 years' time was already considered very fast. He had cultivated diligently in 5 element realm for close to 1 year and had only reached the boundary of 6 Directions realm. He still didn't know when he would be able to succeed in breaking the wall. When he met Pangongtso the last time, the other had been still a young boy in spirit embryo realm, and now, after only half a year, Pangongtso's realm had already surpassed that of Qin Mu. The other had become a divine arts practitioner of 6 Directions realm. This was no ordinary cultivation speed and could be called the speed of a god. There's something strange about that brat. Chancellor Ba Shan pinched a salted vegetable and stuffed it into his mouth. The Hall of 6 Directions in Imperial College is the place which teaches how to break the wall of 6 Directions divine treasure, and all scholars on 5 elements realm who have cultivated perfectly would go there to listen to the lectures. Chun Wanyun, Yu Qinghong, Qin Yu, Yun Ke, Fatty Wei, and other nobles have gone there, and this Pangongtso is also there as well. Nun Hong Fa of Hall of 6 Directions said that his advancements are extremely fast, and he didn't need her guidance at all. He had reached the perfection in 5 elements realm just 3 days ago, and now he was already halfway through breaking the wall. In 2 more days, he would be a divine arts practitioners of 6 Directions realm. That's right. In which step of your cultivation are you in now? I'm basically perfect in 5 elements realm. Qin Mu ate a large mouthful of meat, then said, It's just that I have no understanding regarding 6 Directions realm. Chancellor Ba Shan's gaze flickered. In that case, you should drop by Hall of 6 Directions. Nun Hong Fa teaches this specially. I would like to see if you or Pangongtso is stronger. Qin Mu didn't even raise his head. I feel like there's no need for this. Overlord Body. Yes, I know, you're the Overlord Body, the one above all, haughty brat. Chancellor Ba Shan smiled. I had Chun Wanyun test him, and Wan Yun only managed to make 2 moves before he was defeated. Qin Mu finally raised his head and said in astonishment, 2 moves? Senior brother, are you sure he only used 2 moves to defeat Wan Yun? Chancellor Ba Shan nodded. Qin Mu had a grave expression. Wan Yun's aptitude was indeed extraordinary, and he was one of the more outstanding ones among the young generation. His aptitude and comprehension were merely a level lower than that of Fozi and Daozi, and he had extremely high abilities. When Fozi Fuxin had blocked the gate of Imperial College back then, Wan Yun had gone forth to challenge him was defeated only after over a dozen moves. This clearly showed his abilities. His accumulation was very strong and solid. After receiving Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's guidance, he practically had no shortcomings. After coming back from the southern borders, Qin Mu had seen him less and less. He heard that he spent most of his time in Floor of Heavenly Records, most likely cultivating the state of God transformation of 5 elements realm. Even if Wan Yun, who had succeeded in cultivating the state of God transformations, was not on par with Fozi Fuxin, he was not far from him. Qin Mu reckoned that defeating Wan Yun with just 2 moves would be hard to achieve unless he used a powerful move like sword treading mountains and rivers right at the start. Interesting. After Qin Mu finished eating, he wiped his mouth and smiled. Marshal Khan, what are you planning by pushing me time and again to go to Hall of 6 Directions and meet that Pangong-tso? Chancellor Ba Shan said leisurely, I'm trying to get you to investigate him. I suspect he has been possessed by a spirit. Furthermore, the overlord body shouldn't be scared, right? Spirit possession? Qin Mu was slightly stunned and recalled Butcher mentioning an old monster in the Golden Palace who had reincarnated 18 times and lived through 19 lifetimes when they were heading to Roland's Golden Palace. He cried out, What you mean is? Chancellor Ba Shan nodded and said, I suspect Pangong-tso is no longer Pangong-tso and has been replaced by an incomparably terrifying old monster. One that has lived for 10,000 years. He's the old foe of Teacher Heaven Knife, the one because of which Teacher abandoned his name, not daring to use it anymore. Qin Mu nodded. Chancellor Ba Shan had told him about this before. Butcher didn't tell anyone about his name before, and not even Chancellor Ba Shan knew his name because of that strong practitioner of Roland's Golden Palace that had reincarnated 18 times. That was a terrifying entity that could cast spells and harm people once he knew their names. Wan Yun couldn't dig out any information from him, so I would like you to go meet him at Hall of 6 Directions. Chancellor Ba Shan's gaze flickered when he said, Teacher Heaven Knife's greatest foe is that person, and if Pangong-tso was really possessed by him, killing Pangong-tso would mean getting rid of a foe for Teacher. However, he is still the son of Barbarian D Empire's Khan. So without a definite certainty, I won't make a move. This is why only you can test him. His appearance was boorish, but his thoughts were sharp. Qin Mu rose and said, I'm also trying to break the wall to enter 6 Directions realm, so I'll go to Hall of 6 Directions. He then blushed with shame. Senior brother, which hall is Hall of 6 Directions? Chancellor Ba Shan almost puked blood. You've been in Imperial College for almost a whole year, yet you still don't know which hall is Hall of 6 Directions? Qin Mu said with embarrassment. Even though I've come to Imperial College so long ago, I've only attended 1 lesson. I'll bring you there. Chancellor Ba Shan brought him out of Scholar's residence and they walked away side by side. Something suddenly came to Qin Mu's mind and he asked, Senior brother, have you heard of Heavenly Saint Cult before? Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 272. Great Achievement in Computational Canon. Chancellor Ba Shan threw him at the front of Hall of 6 Directions and turned to leave immediately, afraid that Qin Mu would continue nagging him to join Heavenly Saint Cult. Qin Mu then said resentfully, I'll make you join sooner or later. The directorate of Hall of 6 Directions was Nun Hong Fa. She was a person of virtue and prestige, and also a person from Buddhism, teaching students ever since Imperial College was founded here. Qin Mu walked into Hall of 6 Directions, but it was still early, so no scholars had come to attend the lecture yet. However, the old nun was already here, cleaning the hall's spick and span. When the bell rang, the scholars walked inside, and Nun Hong Fa started the lecture unhurriedly. 6 Directions. What are 6 Directions? heaven, earth, and the 4 cardinal directions. That's the 6 directions. 6 directions divine treasure is in our body, and if we want to break the wall, we have to confirm the location of the 6 directions wall first. How can we confirm? We need to calculate. I've made you guys revise the calculations of the 6 directions yesterday, so have you guys revised it yet? Qin Mu blinked and looked at the other people in the hall. He saw that there were quite a number of scholars attending the lecture here, around 30 people in total. Chen Wanyun, Yu Qinghong, Si Yunxiang, and the rest were all among them. Then he saw Pan Gongzhou. This youth wasn't listening to the lecture, but had closed his eyes, trying to break his wall. Nun Hong Fa's speech slowed down. A person standing on flat ground can easily identify north, south, east, west, up, and down. But how do you determine the north, south, east, and west of the heaven and earth in your body? We can use your spirit embryo divine treasure to determine up and down. The top of the spirit embryo's head is the heaven, and what the feet are stepping on is the earth. With the up and down confirmed, we still need to determine north, south, east, and west, which requires the positions of the 5 element stars of 5 elements divine treasure. You have all learned 10 computational canons which are used to locate the 5 element stars and use them to calculate the north, south, east, and west of the heaven and earth in your hearts. For that, you will need 6 directions algorithm. Now, let's flip to page 17 of 6 directions computational canon, South Compass Point algorithm. Qin Mu looked around and suddenly someone poked him in the back. He turned and saw it was Si Yunxiang. The saintess of heavenly Saint Cult bit her lip and whispered, "I saw Cult Master dragging 3 girls into your room yesterday night. When did I do that?" Qin Mu firmly denied. Si Yunxiang said softly, "One of them was the 7th princess." Qin Mu's face flushed. "Saintess, don't taint my reputation. Lend me your 6 directions computational canon to have a look. It's my first time here, so I don't have the book. The classroom is a sacred ground, so how can whisperings be condoned?" Nun Hong Fa slammed the table and shouted out, "Both of you go out. Stand at the corner of the wall." Si Yunxiang grabbed her 6-direction computational canon and walked out with Qin Mu. The two of them leaned against the wall, and Si Yunxiang passed the computational canon to him while snickering, "Cult Master is lusty. Be careful of landing in the same predicament as Cult Master Li." Qin Mu flipped open the computational canon and saw many methods of calculation. These were methods of calculations that were developed with 10 computational canons, using the foundation of the 5 element stars to calculate the precise location of north, south, east, and west. What Nun Hong Fa was lecturing was the South Compass Point algorithm on page 17, which could help in determining the south. As long as the south was determined, north, east, and west could also be located. A straight line would then be drawn from up to down, and one would be able to determine the most precise location of 6 directions wall in the human body. Everyone was unique, and thus the location of everyone's 5 elements divine treasure was different. However, it just had to be the way to determine 6 directions divine treasure. This was why the location of everyone's 6 directions divine treasure was slightly different, so the calculations have to be precise and could hold no mistakes. Not long after, Qin Mu finished browsing through 6 directions computational canon. He learned that what 6-direction computational canon used was 5 phases canary system and 6 directions scenery system. It required to change the canary system used to calculate the 5 element stars into the scenery system before calculating. Qin Mu was stunned and suddenly thought of Dutian Devil King's advice. Dutian Devil King had once said the octal system could be calculated using the 8 trigrams, and because of this, Qin Mu had been enlightened and comprehended the other tools of calculation in computational canon of supreme mystery. The 8 trigrams of Taiji included yin and yang binary system, for symbols quaternary system, and 8 trigrams octal system. However, if he added 5 phases canary system and 6 directions scenery system, these tools of calculation would be even more complicated. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said the 4 great spirit bodies are not the 5 phases. Instead, each type of spirit body includes the 5 phases. This means that the 4 great spirit bodies, green dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise, are the 4 symbols in the 8 trigrams of Taiji. Everything suddenly became clear to Qin Mu. There were 4 symbols, and each and every one of them had 5 phases. Thus, the different arrangements of the 5 phases formed a symbol. This also meant that the calculation of 5 phases canary system could be used to calculate the transformation of the 4 symbols. In this way, he would have the tool of calculation from 5 to 4. And for 6 directions, the 4 symbols could be used to determine north, south, east, and west, and with the yin and yang, he would have the tool to calculate 6 directions. This means that I can very quickly calculate the location of my 6-direction divine treasure. Qin Mu returned 6 directions computational cannon to see Yunxiang and stretched out his hand. Placing his right palm on his left palm, he pulled them open upwards and downwards, and his vital qi instantly formed a bizarre taiji diagram which included yin and yang for symbols and the 5 phases included in the 4 symbols. Qin Mu pulled open his hands once again in excitement, and layers of the taiji 5 phases diagram broke up, operating respectively in a regular and thorough process. Si Yunxiang looked at the diagram that was changing continuously and immediately asked, "How did you calculate that? It's slightly different from what Nun Hong Fa is teaching. Let me copy it." Qin Mu calculated rapidly and divided his mind into 2 to tell her about what he had comprehended. Si Yunxiang's eyes became brighter and brighter. She was also more talented than others and quickly comprehended the marvel of it. She exclaimed in admiration, "This method is good. The method in 6 directions computational cannon is too complicated and requires 1 to 2 months to be able to calculate the result, making it prone to mistakes. There will be no mistake using your method, and we can calculate it in just 2 to 4 hours." Qin Mu smiled. Taiji, for symbols, 5 elements, 6 directions, and 8 trigrams have originally been calculation tools used for operations. Now that he looked at computational canon of supreme mystery, he felt all kinds of hard-to-understand problems were easy to solve, and he felt happy. However, if he wanted to succeed in cultivating the teleportation divine art, just computational canon of supreme mystery alone was not enough. Nun Hong Fa was still giving her lecture in the hall. As time went by, Qin Mu finally determined the location of his 6 directions divine treasure, which was somewhere near his dantian, connecting the heaven to the earth. That location was sometimes also called Lower Dantian, the place where the 6 directions meet, while the people of Dao sect referred to it as the Yellow Court. The middle dantian was at the heart and was called the Crimson Palace. The upper dantian was located at the heart of the brows, and Dao sect referred to it as Spirit Platform, while Buddhism referred to it as Square Inch Mountain. Qin Mu determined where his Crimson Palace was located, and instantly gathered all his vital qi to rush towards his 6-direction wall. His cultivation was originally incomparably dense and surpassed that of his peers. Gathering all his vital qi this time, he pounded against the 6 directions wall, and it was instantly covered in cracks. Booming sounds of huge waves came from his body as Qin Mu gathered his vital and pounded against it the second time. The sound of was even more resonating this time, and it seemed like angry waves were splitting the shore. They rose to the clouds, and the sound was becoming louder and more intense each time. The poundings from Qin Mu's vital qi became fiercer and fiercer each time. Whoosh! His 6 directions wall suddenly broke, and a huge gap appeared. Qin Mu continued to gather his vital qi to pound at the broken wall, widening the gap. In the Hall of 6 Directions, Nun Hong Fa and the rest of the scholars also heard the sound of vital qi colliding from Qin Mu's body and revealed an astonished expression. Imperial Academician. Nun Hong Fa immediately ran out in a panic and said, "If you didn't calculate the exact location of the 6-direction wall and break it rashly, you will die." Just as she said it, a loud rumble suddenly came from Qin Mu's body as though the heaven and earth had been opened up. Qin Mu's cultivation then rose rapidly. 6 directions wall broken. 6 directions divine treasure awakened. Right at that moment, another rumble came from Hall of 6 Directions, and it was Pangong Tso who had successfully awakened his 6 Directions divine treasure. It was just that the attention of all the scholars and Nun Hong Fa in Hall of 6 Directions had been attracted by Qin Mu, so no one noticed him. The air around Pangong Tso became denser and denser. His gaze flickered as he rose from the mat to look out the hall. Nun Hong Fa was stunned and immediately said, "Imperial Academician, try to close all your divine treasures and burst them all open in one go." Qin Mu took in a deep breath and closed his spirit embryo divine treasure, 5 elements divine treasure, and 6 directions divine treasure. He then gave a low shout and rumbles came from his spirit platform, Crimson Palace, and Imperial Court. There was a total of 3 rumbles as his 3 great divine treasures opened up and his aura increased exponentially. "You really awakened your 6 directions divine treasure." Nun Hong Fa sighed in astonishment and looked at Si Yunxiang, who was at the side. This girl was also trying to break her 6 directions wall. It was evident that she had also found the exact location of her 6 directions wall. The nun had chased these 2 whispering young man and woman out the hall and had never expected the 2 of them to find the location of their 6 directions wall in a short while. One of them even managed to succeed in breaking the wall on his first try and became a divine arts practitioner of 6 directions realm. Nun Hong Fa put her palms together. "Cult Ma, Imperial Academician, you seem to have a secret method to calculate the location of 6 directions wall, which is much faster than this poor nun's 6 directions computational canon. I wonder if you can hand it down." Qin Mu smiled. "None is too polite. My abilities are meager and I don't dare to show off in front of everyone. However, I'm willing to share what I have comprehended with you and fellow scholars." Nun Hong Fa was delighted and immediately invited him into the hall. She said to all the scholars, "Today I've invited the Imperial Academician to give you guys a lecture." "Imperial Academician, please." Qin Mu looked at Pangong Tso, who was sitting at the back of the hall, and smiled. Prince Pangong Tso from the Great Wall has also broken his 6 directions wall and become a divine art practitioner. I wonder if you are interested to share what you have learned." Everyone looked back at Pangong Tso, who shook his head. "I'm a barbarian from the Great Wall, so I don't dare to show off. Cult Master Qin, please." Qin Mu narrowed his eyes and told his operation technique to everyone in the hall. Nun Hong Fa was surprised and delighted, and she grasped the chance to ask questions continuously. She marveled at his technique, making everyone in the hall intoxicated by the lecture. After some time, Qin Mu finally finished talking about his operation technique and the scholars in the hall tested it, trying to master it. However, since some people have high wisdom and some people have low comprehension, not everyone was able to master it. "Imperial Academician, with this kind of operation technique from you, this poor nun will be able to recompile 6 directions computational canon." Nun Hong Fa smiled. "I wonder if Academician is willing to sign his name as a co-author?" Qin Mu said unflinchingly, "This is a good deed that could benefit people for 1,000 years to come. If I could sign my name on it, I would naturally happy to. However, my name on it has to be Heavenly Saint Cult Master Qin Mu." Nun Hong Fa's face blackened, and she thought to herself, "He's the Heavenly Saint Cult Master, so if my name was seen alongside his, wouldn't I be seen as someone from the devil path as well? Excellent, excellent. This poor nun is affected by reputation again. To be lined up with heavenly devil cult. This poor nun is then the honored one." Qin Mu looked at Pangong Tso and smiled. "Little prince, you and I broke through and became divine arts practitioners of 6 directions realm at almost the same time. This is the so-called at the right time at the right place. It's such a rare thing for us to be on the similar realm, so why don't we exchange some blows?" Pangong Tso shook his head. "Cult Master Qin is joking. I'm here to seek knowledge." Qin Mu smiled and said, "Seek knowledge? I happen to have a set of knife skills here that are created and taught by Heaven Knife. Do you want to learn this set of knife skills?" Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 273, 3 Punches and 2 Knives. Powerful. Qin Mu's circulated heavenly devil creation technique to seal his souls and spirits. Astonished. Roland's Golden Palace's techniques were extremely unusual. They used souls for cultivating techniques, and it didn't matter if it were the souls of demons, monsters, gods, or beasts. They could all be used for cultivation. Pangong Tso's gaze was not an ordinary gaze, for in his eyes, there was a divine art that was targeted at souls. With his gaze alone, the divine art would have an impact on the opponent's soul. If the opponent wasn't on guard, they would get stared to death by him. Heavenly Devil Creation Technique was just the right technique to counter that divine art targeted at the soul. Of course, this was because the power of the divine art in Pan Gong Tso's eyes wasn't so powerful that Heavenly Devil Creation Technique couldn't defend against it. If the divine art in his eyes wasn't targeted at the soul, but at the corporeal body or Tao heart, Heavenly Devil Creation Technique wouldn't be able to defend against it. Knife skills of Heaven Knife? Pan Gong Tso's raised eyebrows smoothed out, and he asked, "There are such skills in Floor of Heavenly Records?" "Floor of Heavenly Records don't have them, but I have." Qin Mu smiled as he raised his hand to grab the handle of his pig slaughtering knife. Just as his palm gripped onto the knife's handle, the pages of the books in Hall of Six Directions fluttered, as if there was an invisible giant who had raised a gale by giving a slash. The skin of Pan Gong Tso's face creased from being blown at, and a few strands of hair broke off silently. The hearts of Chun Wanyun, Yu Qinghong, and the rest trembled slightly, and they thought to themselves, Cult Master Qin's abilities have improved quite a bit. He had already cultivated a knife will from his knife. He had merely gone home for New Year, so how come his knife skills had improved so much during that time? They had all followed Qin Mu to the southern border to gain experience by pacifying the rebellion and had been through life and death with him. They knew Qin Mu's abilities, so even though his knife skills had been powerful back then, they were far from how powerful they were at this moment. Cultivating a knife will from knife skills meant that his knife skills had a qualitative leap, and this wasn't something that could be done in just a few days of cultivating diligently. What they didn't know was how difficult it had been for Qin Mu to return home for New Year. It could be said to have been a narrow escape, being ambushed from 10 sides. He was surrounded, chased, blocked, and intercepted all the time, fighting bloody battles for days on end before reaching disabled elderly village after numerous trials and tribulations. Yet when he reached his home, he didn't have a peaceful New Year, either. After the celebration, he had to fight with the elders daily. Butcher, Old Ma, Cripple, Blind, and the rest fed him blows and talked about all kinds of comprehensions. There was also Village Chief, this strong practitioner, training him. Going home this time for New Year was a huge challenge for Qin Mu, which was equivalent to him cultivating for 2 to 3 years diligently. Not only did his knife skills had a qualitative leap, his sword skills, body techniques, Buddhist skills, hand techniques, eye power, and Tao heart had all had qualitative leaps. Pan Gong Tso's brows twitched as the heart of his brows was being pressured by Qin Mu's knife will. It seemed like Qin Mu would unsheath his knife any time and the heart of his brows would be slashed at that moment. He was about to react when Nun Hong Fa suddenly came to stand between the two of them, and Qin Mu's knife will was intercepted by the nun. This is Hall of Six Directions, a place to cultivate 6 directions and awaken your divine treasure. It's not a place for you guys to fight. Nun Hong Fa's gaze swept past the both of them, and she said indifferently, "There are rules in Imperial College, and if you cultivate in my Hall of Six Directions, you're my disciples and have to abide by the rules of my Hall of Six Directions. Both of you have just broken the wall of your Six Directions divine treasure and had just become divine arts practitioners. Your foundations are yet to be stable, so what's the point of being so hot-blooded?" Pan Gong Tso revealed a smile. "None is right. Cult Master Qin. I'll experience your heaven knife another day." Once he said that, he walked towards the exit of the hall. Qin Mu walked beside him and smiled. "Why another day? Isn't it the end of the lesson? I think it's pretty good now. Once we are out of Hall of Six Directions, none won't be able to control us." Outside the hall, the great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace came up from the left and right to follow behind Pan Gong Tso. One of the great shamans said softly, "What's the rush, Cult Master Qin? If your hands are feeling itchy and want to fight, we as retainers would be glad to entertain you anytime." In Hall of Six Direction, Wei Yong, Chun Wanyun and Qin Yu frowned. Cult Master Qin seems slightly aggressive. Pan Gong Tso is an envoy from the foreign country who had come here to seek knowledge. Even though he was an enemy in the past, we have to abide by the etiquette and can't be rude. Monk Yun Ke nodded. He's indeed slightly aggressive. Cult Master Qin should have a grudge against him, right? Qin Mu took a glance at the 2 great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace and said leisurely, I had been to Roland's Golden Palace, and a cauldron of one drug paralyzed nearly all the great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace, scaring the shaman kings into fleeing in defeat. You too must have been paralyzed by me, right? The look on the two great shamans' faces turned dark, but they didn't speak a word. Or maybe, the both of you were beaten up by me? Qin Mu pondered over it, but he didn't have any recollections of the two of them, so he shook his head. It must be because the number of people I killed in Roland's Golden Palace was too high, so I don't remember the both of you. On the golden road of Roland's Golden Palace, the corpses rolled down one after another, dyeing the golden road crimson. My two knives had chopped their way from the outer courtyard disciples all the way to inner courtyard disciples before cutting down the disciple of Grand Shaman. In that time, how many shamans and great shamans had been killed? 100? Even if it's not 100, there must have been at least 80. I killed so many that the hearts of the shaman and great shamans in Roland's Golden Palace turned cold and no one dared to move. The faces of the two great shamans turned darker and darker while their palms trembled slightly. Golden light gradually emanated from the body of one of them, and his head transformed into a bird's head as he screeched. That's because I was not in Roland's Golden Palace. I was out for experience. If I had been in Roland's Golden Palace, 10 of you would have been killed by me. Behind them, the scholars in Hall of Six Directions had just come out and were all greatly shaken. Most of them were slightly dumbstruck when they heard Qin Mu mentioning the incident. Even though they were classmates with Qin Mu, they didn't know that he had actually gone to Roland's Golden Palace to block their gates and even killed so many experts there. I got it! Wei Yong suddenly cried out. I know who defeated Daozi and Fozi. Qin Yu, Chen Wanyun, and the rest were extremely astonished and cried out. What you mean is that when Daozi and Fozi were blocking the gates, it was Cult Master Qin who forced them back? Monk Yun Kei said, No wonder, truly no wonder. I was still thinking about who was the expert who had defeat Fozi and Daozi without leaving his name. So it was actually Cult Master Qin. Si Yunxiang knitted her brows and was slightly displeased in her heart as she muttered to herself. I was clearly the one who defeated Fozi. Chen Wanyun said solemnly. I heard news saying Fozi is dead and was killed by our Cult Master Qin. Yu Qinghong said in a low voice, Not long ago, the Crown Prince conspired to murder the Emperor and attempted to ascend the throne, and I heard it was Cult Master Qin who led the strong practitioners of Heavenly Saint, Heavenly Devil Cult to slaughter their way to the Temple of Heaven. Cult Master Qin had chopped off the head of the Crown Prince personally. Everyone exchanged rumors they had heard and became more astonished the more they talked about him. This classmate Qin beside them had actually done so many universally shocking things. Nun Hong Fa gave them a stare and said, Don't talk about this blindly, and also, stay further away from Cult Master Qin. He's the Devil Cult Master of Heavenly Devil Cult after all. Especially you, Si Yunxiang, you're too close to him. If he pulled you into Heavenly Devil Cult, your whole life would be ruined. Si Yunxiang replied helplessly, I got it. I'll definitely sever all my ties with him. Nun Hong Fa shouted loudly, Cult Master Qin. This is Imperial College and not your Heavenly Devil Cult. There are rules and Eternal Peace Empire have the laws of Eternal Peace Empire. Exercise a little restraint. Then I plundered the treasury of Roland's Golden Palace. Qin Mu walked forward unhurriedly, his expression apathetic. He ignored Nun Hong Fa's words and continued. Your Roland's Golden Palace had hoarded treasures for so long. There were all kinds of precious materials and items, all kinds of spirit treasures and strange weapons that were taken away by me. However, I had not touched even a single one of the treasures of your Golden Palace, but had thrown them on the ground. A thief never leaves empty-handed, but we also know what's worth to steal and what is not. I still understand this logic. Pan Gong Tso's expression remained unmoved, but the two great shamans from Roland's Golden Palace could no longer hold themselves back. Suddenly, the bird-headed great shaman let out a sharp cry which seemed like needles stabbing into the human brain and soul. During his cry, golden wings unfolded from his back with a whoosh. With a tremble, countless brilliant golden feathers shot out and converged into currents in the air, turning into golden light that came stabbing at Qin Mu from all directions. At the same time, This great shaman raised his legs, which had already transformed into golden-colored talons which were incomparably sharp. With the talons that could split rocks, he rushed for Qin Mu's head. Grand Shaman Ruda Scripture's transformation is indeed interesting. You're the disciple of Grand Shaman and have already succeeded in cultivating divine arts. Qin Mu's eyes lighted up, and the two pigs slaughtering knives from his back leaped out. The noise of collision came clanking out like torrential rain, and in that instant, knife lights burst forth and broke through the golden sword lights. The knife lights seemed like they were 12 yards long. With one vertical and one horizontal light, every cloud has a silver lining severed one of the talons. The next moment, Qin Mu closed in, holding his knife in a reverse grip, raising the knife from forbidden. When he raised the huge knife, the shaman's chest was split open to his belly. Before the corpse of that great shaman even collapsed to the ground, the head of another great shaman trembled and transformed into that of an elephant. His fists were like small mountains when he punched forward. Qin Mu let go of his knives and turned around. His vital qi burst forth, and the band that tied up his hair exploded in pieces. His pitch-black hair was raised perfectly straight by his vital qi that was soaring into the air. Boom! Their fists collided, and all the muscles on Qin Mu's body throbbed. There were even some muscles swiveling and coiling like pythons under his skin. The vital qi in Qin Mu's body appeared to be coiling green dragons. But since he had executed both Nine Dragons Monarch Technique and Rulai's Mahayana Sutra at the same time, it was also like a huge Buddha sitting upright. With dragons coiling around the Buddha's body, a loud rumble sounded out as he unleashed another punch. The great shaman was like a golden elephant god with incomparable strength, able to split the heaven and earth apart with a punch and a kick due to the immense strength in his fists and legs. Bang, bang, bang. The fists of the two people collided thrice, and Qin Mu pulled back his hands, dispersing his shocking aura. All the throbbing muscles in his body calmed back down. On the other hand, the elephant-headed great shaman snarled ferociously. He gave another punch at his opponent's face, and his boundless strength raised a gale. However, before this punch could even land on Qin Mu's body, an explosion suddenly came from the great shaman's body, and all his bones broke into pieces. His muscles disintegrated, and his vital qi scattered, which resulted in him collapsing onto the ground like a pile of mush. Air only came out from his mouth but did not go in. Qin Mu's 3 punches had resulted in a power that reached all parts of the great shaman's body, shattering all his bones, muscles, and vital qi. The scholars from Hall of Six Directions were all flabbergasted, and they stood still in a daze. Even Nun Hong Fa felt her body turning cold. Qin Mu was basically a lawless ruffian, beating 2 of the foreign country's envoys to death with just 3 punches and 2 knives, and it was even done in Imperial College. Qin Mu ignored them and turned to look at Pangong Tso with a smile on his face. He didn't look like a vicious ruffian that would kill people without reason in the least when he said, "Who will be the one to drag these corpses away and clean the floor? Little prince, my abilities should not be bad, right? Do you have the urge to make a move?" Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 274. Killing People with Shaman Spells. Murder! Murder! A steward hurriedly ran in to report to Grand Chancellor Gu Linwan while shouting, "This is bad! Imperial Academician Qin Mu has committed murder again." Gu Linwan was drinking tea and seemed unconcerned. He asked with a smile, "What's there to be shocked about? He's the heavenly devil cult master, so is there a need for you to be so panicky just because he committed murder? It would be weird if he didn't commit murder. Who did he kill now?" The steward didn't even bother to gasp for air as he said, "He killed 2 envoys from Barbarian the Empire." Piak. The teacup in Gu Linwan's hand shattered into pieces and his complexion changed drastically. He cried out, "The envoys from Barbarian the Empire? 2 of them at that? That's not right. I had already treated him to a meal, so why is he still causing trouble for me?" He immediately stood up, thinking to rush out of the hall, but then he stopped in his track and paced to and fro while muttering to himself. He is the heavenly devil cult master, the head of the number 1 sacred ground of the devil path. If I ask him for an explanation, I'll just be cutting my life short. It's still better to report this incident to His Highness. Chancellor Ba Shan stood not far away and observed Pan Gongzhou and Qin Mu. When he saw what was happening, his head started to ache and he felt it becoming heavy. Junior brother, I've only wanted you to test Pan Gongzhou. So why did you have to kill the envoys of Barbarian D Empire? The envoys had been sent by the Khan of Barbarian D Empire, with Pan Gongzhou as the leader. There were over 10 of them, and Qin Mu had just killed 2 of them in Imperial College. This incident would definitely not be settled peacefully. Khan Rwandi of Barbarian D Empire was considered a hero of the prairie, a person with great talent and bold vision. He had annexed the countries of the other Khans and formed a huge empire in the prairie to contend against Eternal Peace Empire. He even learned the culture of Eternal Peace Empire and drew the good aspects of Eternal Peace Empire to develop Barbarian D Empire. He reformed the internal affairs of his country and even created an imperial court that was similar to that of Eternal Peace Empire. He also built schools everywhere. Looking at the situation at hand, he had not yet united the entire prairie, which was why he couldn't contend against Eternal Peace Empire at full force. However, when he united the entire prairie, he would direct all of his power to deal with Eternal Peace. Since Eternal Peace Empire had been through 2 disasters, the power of the empire had been severely weakened, so the main motive behind Khan Rwandi dispatching an envoy was to see how weak Eternal Peace Empire had gotten, besides having his people study there and learn. He was like a male eagle above the prairie, ready to invade the east any time. As long as he had the chance, he would lead the iron cavalry of the prairie to plunder and whip the central plains. However, it was evident that Qin Mu didn't care about these, for he killed the 2 envoys without any worries. This action could very well incite a war between the 2 empires. Since the effects of the disasters had yet to fade and Eternal Peace Empire was still in a weak state, if Khan Rwandi took advantage of this chance to send his army forward, the empire would probably be in great danger. Chancellor Ba Shan was slightly regretful that he had gotten Qin Mu to test out Pan Gongzhou. It was then evident to him that this junior brother who came from great ruins was lawless and daring. After killing the envoys, he could just pat his buttocks and return back to great ruins, leaving behind a terrible mess. Now that the Crown Prince is supervising the empire, let's see how Crown Prince Yushu will handle this. Chancellor Ba Shan couldn't help feeling a headache for Ling Yushu. Ever since this young man had become the Crown Prince, he had quite a smooth journey in supervising the empire. He even wrote a decree of his crimes to seek forgiveness from heaven at the Temple of Heaven. No matter if it was reclaiming the lands or continuing with the disaster relief, he had done very well and received the support of many people. However, this would be his first difficult problem in supervising the empire. Pan Gongzhou's gaze landed on Qin Mu's body, but there was little emotion in his gaze. No matter what Qin Mu did or how he agitated him, his mind didn't waver. Pan Gongzhou said indifferently, "The cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult naturally wouldn't have bad abilities. Maybe there's some misunderstanding between us. If cult master doesn't mind, I can host a banquet at Jade Fragrance Floor to apologize to cult master. What does cult master Qin think about this?" "Great." Qin Mu was very free and easy, smiling. "Your 2 retainers were really daring, actually coming to make a move on me. You as the owner should indeed host a banquet to apologize." The corners of Pan Gongzhou's eyes twitched as he turned to leave. Qin Mu's gaze, filled with murderous intent, landed on his back. However, Pan Gongzhou walked steadily and didn't seem to notice anything or feel uncomfortable. Only his footsteps were slightly messed up, so it seemed like he was walking with a hobble. This fellow. Qin Mu took in a deep breath and deeply felt that Pan Gongzhou was a thorny and terrifying problem. He had challenged him time and time again and even slapped his face right in front of everyone by insulting and killing his retainers. However, this person still remained emotionless. Even when Qin Mu's murderous intent was directed at him, he was still able to walk away steadily and only had a slight hobble. He was truly a terrifying person. Qin Mu didn't dare to say it to others, but if it were strong practitioners like Daozi or Fozi, they wouldn't have dared to take a step. With his gaze filled with murderous intent pointed at their backs, Fozi and Daozi wouldn't dare to even make a single step as moving would reveal their flaw. If those that had higher cultivation and attainments than Daozi and Fozi were targeted by Qin Mu like this, they would either hobble or move back slowly while looking at him. As to why they would hobble, it would be a way of moving the body to avoid any possible attacks. They couldn't walk in a straight line, and would have to move their bodies up and down. This was why the posture of Pan Gong Tso walking away looked slightly strange, like he was hobbling. In fact, he had not revealed any single flaw, and didn't give Qin Mu any chance to attack. The most terrifying point was that Pan Gong Tso's hobbling hadn't too severe, which meant that his attainments and cultivation were extremely high. Chancellor Ba Shan walked over in quick steps, coming to Qin Mu's side. He saw that Qin Mu still looking at Pan Gong Tso's back, which had left some time ago. "Senior brother Ba Shan, you gave me another thorny problem." Qin Mu let out a shaky breath and looked at Chancellor Ba Shan before saying solemnly, "This Pan Gong Tso is one of the strongest existences among the ones I've met of the same generation. He's even stronger than Daozi Lin Xian. If he's not that old monster that has reincarnated 18 times, this person must be an overlord body as me." Chancellor Ba Shan had an unpleasant look. "That's why you killed 2 envoys?" Qin Mu was stunned and mumbled, "You didn't say I can't kill anyone. What's more, didn't we already kill numerous great shamans from Roland's Golden Palace? Killing only 2 this time is considered their steal." Chancellor Ba Shan laughed from anger. "How is that the same? When I brought you and the princess to Block Gate the previous time, I used my identity as Marshal Khan, which is unrelated to Eternal Peace Empire. This time, since they are envoys, they represent Barbarian D Empire. Killing 2 envoys from Barbarian D Empire means you're slapping the face of Barbarian D Empire. How can they take it lying down?" Qin Mu said honestly, "You also didn't say, I've already killed them and I can't revive them now." Chancellor Ba Shan had a splitting headache and let out a shaky breath as well. "Now you wait for the Crown Prince to summon you. The Crown Prince has most likely heard about this matter by now, will definitely have a worse headache than me. You are the Devil Cult Master of Heavenly Devil Cult and an official who has done meritorious service. Even the position of the Crown Prince was fought for him by you, so he can't scold or beat you. And also," his expression turned grave as he said solemnly, "if Pan Gong Tso is that old monster, you must be careful tonight. If that old monster knows your name, he can cast a spell to kill you. After you meet the Crown Prince, I'll go to your room tonight." Qin Mu nodded. He indeed couldn't lower his guard against an existence that even Butcher had to hide his name from. As Chancellor Ba Shan had expected, Crown Prince Ling Yushu found Qin Mu after noon. What was different from what Chancellor Ba Shan had expected was that Ling Yushu had not summoned Qin Mu, but instead came to Imperial College and met Qin Mu personally. "For your highness to visit personally, I'm in reverence," Qin Mu greeted. Ling Yushu took a glance at him and sighed. "I don't see any signs of reverence from you. On the contrary, you look quite composed. Cult Master Qin, this incident today is really giving me a headache. I thought for the whole afternoon, yet I still can't think of an explanation for it. You are always the one that's full of ideas. Teach me how to give an explanation." Qin Mu smiled. "That's simple. Your Highness can write a letter to Khan Rwandi and say that the 2 envoys of Barbarian D Empire didn't listen to civilized teachings and their wild natures were hard to tame. They even dared to make a move to kill people in a supreme sacred ground like Imperial College, trying to harm the life of the Palace Grandee. This Palace Grandee is also Cult Master Qin of the number 1 sacred ground of the Devil Path in Eternal Peace Empire. Cult Master Qin was angered, so he had killed those 2 envoys. Your Highness can also say Cult Master Qin's raging temper is hard to quell, so Khan Rwandi must offer gifts as apology, otherwise there would be unthinkable consequences." Ling Yushu was dumbfounded. After a moment, he let out a shaky breath and sighed. "All right, I'll write it this way. If Khan Rwandi is angered and launch his army on us, you shall go to the front line for me and rush forward with your head." Qin Mu's face blackened. Ling Yushu smiled. "Heavenly Devil Cult Master also knows how to be scared? All right, let's not talk about this, Cult Master. I feel there's no point in you staying in this Imperial College all the time. There are close to 500 foreign envoys in Imperial College, and if you get excited and kill a few more of them one day, how will I be able to supervise the Empire? I would have my hands full just trying to clean up your messes by writing letters to the emperors of the other countries every day. Qin Mu said resentfully, I don't kill frequently. Isn't there a reason for this incident? Ling Yusher smiled and said, You're a divine arts practitioner now and your abilities are high. Father appointed you as the palace grandee and gave you an honorary title without actual power. How about this? Let me give you an actual position. Father and imperial preceptor have already woken up, and after a few days, I won't be required to handle the politics and will definitely have to go out to send disaster relief. You can follow me. Going out on this journey, I will need to bring some officials from Ministry of Works and some scholars from Imperial College. He was truly not at ease with leaving Qin Mu here as he reckoned he would make trouble out of nothing again. So why shouldn't he bring him around? Qin Mu pondered it for a moment and realized that there was indeed nothing for him to do if he stayed at Imperial College. He couldn't fight or kill, and there were too many restrictions to his liking, so why should he not follow this crown prince for a walk? They were walking side by side when Ling Yushu suddenly asked, I've heard my sister slept at your place last night? Qin Mu quivered and said in a firm face, Your Highness, there's definitely nothing of the sort that has happened. Don't listen to the slanders of others and spoil the clean reputation of the princess and me. Ling Yushu's gaze fell on his face and saw his sincere expression. The crown prince then breathed a sigh of relief. I believe you. All right, I'll help you settle this incident of killing the envoys and write a letter to Khan Rwandi with a thick skin. You should get ready now. You'll leave the capital with me in a few days' time. Qin Mu saw him off and Chancellor Ba Shan walked over while saying secretively, I overheard the crown prince saying that 6th Princess Ling Yushio slept over at your place the last night. Come to think of it, I had indeed seen the 6th princess and 2 palace maids carrying lanterns down the mountain this morning. Did you too? Qin Mu's head started to ache, and he said firmly, Nothing of the sort. Senior brother, it's because of this big mouth of yours that Grandpa Butcher always runs when he sees you, not daring to reunite with you. You should exercise some restraint and not speak on hearsay. Chancellor Ba Shan muttered, I was just curious. Don't worry. I'm the most tight-lipped. I'm not like Duke Wei, that impoverished man who shouts everywhere with that voice of his. If Pangong Tso is the old monster, you will be in danger tonight. Let us share a room tonight so we can look after each other. Try to be clever when sleeping tonight. Don't be too deep asleep. That night Chancellor Ba Shan's snores were like thunder as he slept on a mat laid down on the ground. Qin Mu's bed trembled from the sound, and his body was too numb from the shakes for him to fall asleep. Nothing strange happened for the longest time until an hour or two after midnight. A chill wind suddenly came blowing over and blew open the 2 window lattices. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 275. Passed away very peacefully. Qin Mu immediately sat up and looked out the window. Chancellor Ba Shan's snores were deafening, and he didn't wake up even when the chill wind blew into the room. Strange chanting came from outside, but the voice was not clear. Qin Mu couldn't tell whether it was light or heavy, slow or fast. Despite that, he immediately used heavenly devil creation technique to seal his souls and spirits before arousing his vital qi. Junior Protector's sword, which was hanging at the head of his bed, came out of its sheath, and the silver sword light lit up the room. There was a white figure floating to and fro outside the window, and Junior Protector's sword hummed and trembled. Sword lights shot out in a flash, and a few human heads outside the window fell to the ground. Harming people with shaman spells might sound bizarre, but those spells were nothing more than attacks targeted at the soul or the corporeal body. Even though Qin Mu wasn't too old, he knew the reason behind the bizarre occurrences. Spells that were targeted at the corporeal body required one to use secret techniques to enter the room and kill the person. Meanwhile, there were much more unimaginable methods that were targeted at the souls, for example, shaman poison. It could be used to poison the enemy's souls, and it was colorless, odorless, formless, and traceless, making it extremely hard for people to guard against it. Another example would be worshipping the soul using a straw doll. One would write the other person's date of birth and 8 characters of a horoscope on a doll and worship it for 10 days, worshipping away a soul or spirit each day. The 7 spirits would leave in 7 days and the 3 souls would come after. There was also victory-loathing technique, harming the soul to harm the body. By using needles or sharp blades to harm the soul, the shaman could make use of the connections between the soul and the corporeal body to harm the corporeal body by harming the soul. For example, by pricking the limbs of the soul, the enemy's corporeal body would also be pricked. If the heart of the brows was pricked, the mind would be messed up, and such. Being able to kill people by knowing their name was indeed slightly hard to imagine, but it shouldn't be much different from these two methods. Qin Mu sealing his souls and spirits while hanging Junior Protector's sword at the head of his bed was to guard against these two methods. Suddenly, a weird laughter sounded, and Qin Mu looked over in a hurry. He saw numerous small humans climbing in through the window and jumping onto the ground. They wielded knives, axes, military forks, and rode small horses in a formation, looking like a huge army with several hundred men. This small human army swarmed forward and stood on Chancellor Ba Shan's chest, yet Chancellor Ba Shan didn't wake up, continuing to snore like thunder. The small human in the lead wielded a long spear and rode a steed on Chancellor Ba Shan's nose. He pointed his spear at Qin Mu, who had already sat up, and his eyes were filled with the glow of excitement. With an incomprehensible shout, the other small humans went toward Qin Mu like a flood. The small humans were abnormally excited and kept shouting incomprehensibly as they waved their weapons with a fierce demeanor. Yet even though there were several hundred of them, Qin Mu felt that he could flatten all of them with 2 or 3 steps. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was the reason why Butcher didn't dare to use his real name. Qin Mu pulled out his sword, but just as the sword lights were about to burst forth to sweep away all these small humans, he suddenly heard someone calling his name. This voice came in with the chill wind, and the words were dragged out, as if the person was quite far away. Qin Mu didn't say a word, but that voice was closing in on him rapidly. When other people called your name, even if you did not reply, there would be an uncontrollable reaction in your heart, and that voice had used this reaction to sense his location. So just as the sword lights in Qin Mu's hand were about to slaughter the small army, he suddenly felt a chill invading the heart of his brows. His hand that was about to pull out the sword, and his soul froze in place. When his soul was frozen, his body did the same, and the sword lights naturally extinguished. The small humans danced around in joy and climbed onto his body, tunneling into him through his mouth, ears, and nose. The next moment, Qin Mu saw these small humans carrying him away in a sprint. What they were carrying wasn't his corporeal body. They had tunneled inside him to carry away his soul. These small humans had actually run into his body and tied up his soul tightly, then brought it out above their heads. Qin Mu didn't know what they were saying as they squealed to one another before running away with him. Qin Mu felt that he was unable to move while the sceneries in front of his eyes flickered before turning pitch black. All the lights in the surroundings vanished and only the darkness remained. He could see bubbles of light coming into existence under his body, and then noticed that he was lying on a sacrificial altar. The small humans had placed him down and were looking up at the sky. The one in the lead squeaked at the darkness, and the sacrificial altar slowly rose up. Looking around, Qin Mu could see huge faces that were like the faces of puppets blocking his 4 sides. The faces of these wooden puppets were humongous and revealed an expression that was a smile yet not a smile, a cry yet not a cry. After that, the sacrificial altar trembled and rose up once again. A huge palm lifted it up along with the 4 wooden puppets, and Qin Mu immediately saw a blazing flame of light in the darkness. It was a huge eye which was much larger than the faces of the wooden puppets. Then, more and more huge eyes lighted up the darkness as they floated in the sky, looking extremely strange. Victory-loathing spell? When Qin Mu saw this sight, his heart trembled slightly. Pan Gong Tso must have used victory-loathing spell to make use of the small humans to invade him, trapping the souls and spirits that were sealed in his body on such a sacrificial altar. This method was very strange. When he heard the voice, it found its way over even if he didn't answer. That voice then transformed into a sacrificial altar in his body, and even though his souls and spirits had been sealed in his body, it wasn't enough. However, his souls and spirits should still be in his body, and as long as they were in his body, he had the chance to make a comeback. No matter what shaman spell you used, You will need to rely on your own magic power. In my body, your magic power will never surpass mine. You can forget about killing me." Qin Mu flipped his body up and shouted, "Sword, come!" Suddenly, a sword pellet came flying over through the darkness and floated in front of him. This sword pellet was the one Mute had given him when he had gone back to the village for New Year. Qin Mu had once used this sword pellet to guide out the remnant of the god's divine art out of Imperial Preceptor's body, which resulted in the sword pellet being obliterated quite a bit and becoming smaller. Sword lights burst from the sword pellet and swept through the small humans in all directions, causing them to suffer a crushing defeat. The small humans had their chests and bellies split by Qin Mu, but they were not yet dead. Their broken limbs crawled here and there to reassemble themselves before continuing to attack Qin Mu. Meanwhile, the faces of the wooden puppets around the sacrificial altar revealed a strange smile as they raised their arms stiffly to smash towards him, who was in the center of the sacrificial altar, causing sparks to fly in all directions. Qin Mu executed the sword pellet to contend against the strange wooden puppets and felt they possessed unusual strength. He was almost unable to withstand their blows. Some of the small humans were smashed by the wooden puppets and turned into a paper-like state, but in the next instant, they swelled back up as if they had been pumped with air and continued swinging their swords at Qin Mu. At this moment, the weird eyes in the darkness blazed furiously and beams of fire came shooting over in all directions. Qin Mu gritted his teeth to withstand the attacks, his soul on the verge of dispersing from all the attacks. The small humans, wooden puppets, and weird eyes seemed to be able to revive and come at him endlessly. There was no end to killing them, and they just kept attacking him, not knowing fatigue. Just as Qin Mu was about to fall into despair from exhaustion, he became furious. "Is senior brother Ba Shan still sleeping?" At this moment, the crows of the roosters rang out in the air, and he could faintly hear the night watchman banging the gong to signal the 5th of the 5 night watch periods. Then, Qin Mu heard Chancellor Ba Shan's yawn from seemingly far away. "I waited the whole night, yet Pan Gong Tso never came to visit personally, truly disappointing. That brat is really careful and didn't cast any spells personally to kill junior brother Qin, but had another great shaman make his move." Qin Mu was slightly stunned. "Senior brother Ba Shan knew I was trapped? A pity only a great shaman of 7 Stars realm took the bait." Qin Mu heard Chancellor Ba Shan pulling out his knife, and the tyrant knife was unsheathed. The golden knife adorned in white jade, with rays piercing into the night through the window. Man of 50 years yet nothing made, carrying knife in 8 wilderness all alone. Along with the song, a blinding light split apart the darkness and came down from the sky, slashing onto the sacrificial altar ruthlessly. The heaven and earth instantly rumbled before starting to crumble and disintegrate. This knife seemed to have split the world in 2 places that gradually opened up towards the left and right. These were Qin Mu's eyes, which were gradually opening, but what was strange was that he felt the eyelids of his eyes open towards the left and the right. "This is the victory-loathing spell of Roland's Golden Palace, which I just undid for you. This kind of victory-loathing spell turns your eyeballs half upside down so you are looking to your left and right." Chancellor Ba Shan appeared to Qin Mu to be standing on the wall. "Mobilize the muscles in your eyes and slowly adjust your eyeballs back to normal." Qin Mu followed his instructions. After some time, his eyeballs finally returned to normal and he immediately said, "Senior brother, I got trapped." Chancellor Ba Shan nodded and pointed forward. "This is what trapped you." Qin Mu lowered his head and was slightly stunned. He saw that the sacrificial altar that had trapped him wasn't the real thing but a silver plate which had 4 wooden puppets that were the size of a palm around it. The small humans that had lifted him up were soybeans, and the horses under them were bean sprouts. Meanwhile, the eyes floating in the sky had been the eyes of huge spiders and not weird eyes that had been arranged in a line. Under the plate was a weasel. The spider and the weasel were both killed with a knife and died an unnatural death. "I thought it would be Pan Gong Tso making a move and not some great shaman of 7 Stars realm." Chancellor Ba Shan shook his head. "I reckon Pan Gong Tso didn't make a move but sent a great shaman of 7 Stars realm instead because he was worried I would be by your side. He's really careful." Qin Mu looked out the window and saw that the heads he had severed using the sword lights were just straw men that were covered in white cloth. He asked, "Senior brother, what happened to the great shaman of Seven Stars Realm?" "He's dead," Chancellor Ba Shan answered. "He cast his spell in his dream to harm you with victory-loathing technique, and my knife broke his spell. My knife then entered his dream through his spell and cut him down in his sleep. In other words, he passed away very peacefully." Qin Mu was skeptical and asked, "Knife skills can be cultivated to such a level?" Chancellor Ba Shan smiled. "Teacher Heaven Knife's knife skills can be called a legend. He can cut open the void, but I can't." When morning came, everyone in Imperial College was discussing how another envoy in Barbarian D Empire had died. It was said he died suddenly on the 5th of the 5-night watch periods with blood flowing out of all his orifices. He had died extremely miserably and even screamed 3 times before falling over. Qin Mu criticized in his heart, "Didn't senior brother Ba Shan say he had passed away peacefully?" When afternoon came, a shaman came forth and bowed. Prince invites Cult Master Qin to a banquet. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 276. Feel like killing people. Pangong Tso ordered a great shaman to cast a spell to take my life yesterday, and then dares to invite me to a banquet today? Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Does he think as an equivalent sacred ground, Roland's Golden Palace can pressure Heavenly Devil Cult? Or does he have other plans? Chancellor Ba Shan walked over and asked, "Do you need me to follow you?" Qin Mu shook his head. "No need for that. If Pangong Tso dared to kill me in the open, he wouldn't have used shaman spells to kill me yesterday. I will meet him alone." Jade Fragrance Floor was the largest restaurant in the whole capital, using the layout of gardens. With a hall and a courtyard, there were rock gardens, flowing waters, fountains, and even beautiful women dancing and singing. Each courtyard was separated from the others and was very elegant and calm. The people coming here to eat and drink weren't here for the food but to have a place to chat. Before the disaster, the business here had been flourishing and even high officials and noble people had to book in advance. However, after the natural disaster broke out, the emperor had sent disaster relief personally, and the high officials and noble people in the capital city also had to donate, so the business of Jade Fragrance Floor became slack. It was expected that after the effects of the natural disaster faded, the business of this restaurant would definitely flourish again. In Green Bamboo Garden of Jade Fragrance Floor, Pangong Tso welcomed Qin Mu and said, "Cult Master Qin, my retainers have offended you, and now that they are dead, let us bury the hatchet with their deaths. May Cult Master be magnanimous enough to forgive us." Qin Mu walked into Green Bamboo Garden and looked around. Prince is courteous. This courtyard was called Green Bamboo Garden, and entering through a door with the shape of a full moon, there were thin bamboos as shade covering both sides of the path. He could hear the babbling of running water, and after 2 turns, he saw clear water flowing down from a rock garden filled with oddly shaped rocks. Even though it was a small stream, it had the feeling of a waterfall crashing down onto the rocks at a great speed. This flowing water from the waterfall flowed into a jade vase held in the hand of a bodhisattva statue. That jade vase was tilted forward, letting the water flow out and land into the pond in the south after circulating 1 round in the vase. Qin Mu took a look and saw some sandy mounds in the southern pond. They were islands scattered about like stars in the sky, which was very interesting. Bodhisattva of Compassion of the South Sea was writing on the pond, and the words were vast and deep like the sea. The bodhisattva was sculpted with the rock garden, and some small spells must have been used to let the water flow continuously. Even though the pond wasn't big, everything was done to the smallest detail. Looking at it up close, there was a feeling of standing in the sky above the South Sea and overlooking everything below. "Cult Master Qin, please." Pangong Tso raised his hand and invited Qin Mu to walk through the corridor. They came to a private room beside the pond. Its windows were already open, so he could see the scenery of the garden by sitting near the window. There were 2 great shamans in yellow standing at the left and right side of the door without any expressions. Pangong Tso waved his hand and said, "Both of you can fall back. Tell them to serve the dishes and wine." The 2 great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace walked out of the room, and after a moment, a waitress came to serve the dishes and wine. A few more maidens with alluring figures then came to the courtyard wearing outfits of different tribes. They played the blowing horn and yangqin while beating instruments like the damaru, giving off a different kind of flavor to the music. It wasn't my idea to send someone to kill you yesterday night. Pan Gongzhou looked deeply into Qin Mu's eyes. I don't need to borrow the hands of others to kill people. What happened yesterday was merely my retainer seeing you kill too many disciples of Roland's Golden Palace and becoming indignant, which was why he entered his dream to cast spells to harm you. Qin Mu couldn't help feeling astonished when he heard him bringing this up. He had originally expected Pan Gongzhou to avoid this topic, so he was surprised when the other decided to clear things up right after they were seated. I see. Qin Mu smiled. Luckily I'm fine and he's already dead. I believe that little prince has nothing to do with this matter. Pan Gongzhou shook his head. You know nothing. I knew why he was going to kill you, but I didn't stop him. Does Cult Master Qin want to know the reason why? Qin Mu was slightly astonished and said modestly, Little Prince is truly surprising. I'd like to hear the details. Pan Gongzhou poured wine for him and said, The reason why I didn't stop him was because I knew you would definitely let Chancellor Ba Shan stay in your room to guard against me casting spells in the night to kill you. He couldn't kill you, but he could delay you. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and picked up his wine cup. The two of them toasted each other and drank the wine. Pan Gongzhou then continued, You and I broke the wall at the same time and entered Six Directions realm. I didn't agree to your challenge at that time because I could see your battle power was indeed extraordinary, and I wasn't 100% confident that I could defeat you. However, everything has changed after this one day. 1 day's time. I just needed 1 day's time. He revealed a smile. The victory and defeat in a battle between experts can be decided with just 1 day's time. You had to meet the Crown Prince in the afternoon, so you had no time to strengthen your Six Directions realm, to discover the marvel of Six Directions realm. At night, you had to guard against the shaman spells from that retainer of mine and didn't have the time research Six Directions realm. On the other hand, I had a whole day's time to strengthen my Six Directions and raise my cultivation. Just 1 day's time is enough to turn your odds of victory to 0. Qin Mu was once again astonished and examined the other's face. He saw that it still had a soft and immature air to it, but his gaze was deep, having a kind of depth that a youth shouldn't have. He exclaimed in admiration, The little prince of the prairie is truly extraordinary. No wonder even Heaven Knife is afraid of you. You are only 14 years old now, right? Pan Gongzhou poured wine for him once again and said, 13 years old. The people of the prairie brave the wind and sun, so our bodies are more rugged, making us look older. 13 years old is my age in this lifetime. If Cult Master is asking about the age of my soul, I'm already 11,000 years old. Qin Mu laughed loudly. Little Prince is making me more and more astonished. I didn't expect you to say this out so easily. I have no need to hide it from you, Pan Gongzhou said. Cult Master Qin is also extremely admirable. You are the disciple of Heaven Knife, right? To have this kind of cultivation at such a young age makes me exclaim endlessly in admiration. If it was on the day when we had broken into Six Directions realm, I would have only been 80% confidence in defeating you in a match. Oh! Qin Mu smiled and didn't say a word as he fiddled around with his wine cup. Pan Gongzhou said firmly, Counting this lifetime, I have already lived through 19 lifetimes. In my long life, I met countless heroes with none to compare with at that time and saw numerous lives and deaths, sorrows and happiness. Sometimes, I feel like I'm a reef standing upright in the passage of time while countless peerless talents flow by hurriedly like rushing waves, and even exceptional emperors of various eras are merely passing waves that I've paid no attention to. Even Heaven Knife, who had raised his knives at heaven, was merely a passing traveler hurrying by. I remember that in my 6th lifetime, I had felt that my path, skills, and divine arts were no longer able to go another step further, so I had entered the Central Plains to become a member of Dao Sect, to learn Pre-Celestial Supreme Mystery Technique and Dao Sword. At that time, Dao Master of Dao Sect held high expectation for me and allowed me to become Daozi. He even expected me to become Dao Master and lead Dao Sect. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. This old monster had entered Dao Sect once and even became Daozi? Dao Sect's ultimate arts, Pre-Celestial Supreme Mystery Technique and 14 Writings of Tao Sword were both learned by him. Tao Sword was very hard to comprehend. In that lifetime, I learned up to the 13th sword, but I could never comprehend the 14th sword from the beginning to the end. Pan Gong Tso sighed ruefully. Tao Sword was simply too difficult, so even if I had the power of Pre-Celestial Supreme Mystery Technique, it was too difficult to comprehend it completely. It required one to have a terrifying comprehension of algebra. Until I died of old age, I still didn't manage to learn the 14th sword. When I started my 7th lifetime, I entered Tao sect again, but I still didn't manage to learn the 14th sword. I only succeeded in cultivating half of that sword move. When it came to the 8th lifetime, I entered Great Thunderclap Monastery. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently, and he looked into the other's eyes deeply. You felt that Tao Sword could no longer allow you to break through SP. You went to Great Thunderclap Monastery to learn Rulai's Mahayana Sutra? Wrong, Pan Gong Tso said solemnly. I went there to comprehend Buddhism. Great Thunderclap Monastery's Dharma has an extremely high comprehension on one's nature, and Rulai's Mahayana Sutra gathered Mahayana Buddhists that cultivated their nature, so I naturally had to learn it. I began from a small monk, reading through all the Buddhist scriptures of Great Thunderclap Monastery, comprehending all of them before learning Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. Qin Mu asked, "The Rulai of that generation should have also held high expectations for you, right?" He said my comprehension was the best in the world in that era, and my attainments in Buddhism even surpassed his. I was said to have unhindered eloquence. I cultivated all 20 heavens of Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, but I still left Great Thunderclap Monastery in the end. The Buddhism of Great Thunderclap Monastery couldn't allow me to break through the final realm. In my next lifetime, I reincarnated into a woman and went to Passion Parting Palace. Another lifetime passed by, and I went to Little Jade Capital. I stayed there for a few lifetimes, only then did I manage to learn all of the ultimate arts there. It's indeed the sacred ground that's above the 3 big sacred grounds. He sighed ruefully as he seemed to reminisce about the days in Little Jade Capital. He paused for a moment. Then I went to Heavenly Saint Cult. The light in Qin Mu's eyes flickered, and he asked, "Heavenly Saint Cult? You learned great educational heavenly devil scriptures? What did you comprehend?" Pan Gong Tso revealed a smile and said, "Great educational heavenly devil scriptures are very strong, but compared to Rulai's Mahayana Sutra and Tao Sword, they are slightly inferior. When I planned to leave, I heard about the unity technique of great educational heavenly devil scriptures which could only be passed down from cult master to cult master. I wanted to receive it very much, so I remained in Heavenly Saint Cult. It's a pity that the Heavenly Devil Cult master of that generation was very strong, and his disciple was very strong as well. This disciple was acclaimed as the saint that appears once every 500 years. I lost to him and missed the opportunity to become the cult master." Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief, and Pan Gong Tso continued, "That's why I betrayed Heavenly Devil Cult and brought the experts of Tao sect and gathered the righteous practitioners of the righteous path to attack Heavenly Saint Cult, killing this saint that appears once every 500 years. The wine in Qin Mu's wine cup trembled and one drop landed on the table. That saint was indeed rare to find, and he fought Tao Master to death while managing to injure me severely after I had launched a sneak attack on him. However, he was still exhausted to death by us using countless practitioners of the righteous path." Pan Gong Tso said leisurely, "Before he died, he passed on the position of the cult master and unity technique to Heavenly King Qing of that time. Even though I was severely injured, how could I let everything go to waste after thinking I could conquer Heavenly Saint Cult with one more step? Therefore, I continued to lead everyone to attack, yet that cult master Qing imparted unity technique to the saintess before leading the cult followers to fight to the death with me. I had no choice but to retreat back to the prairie with my injuries." He sighed ruefully. "After that, I heard that cult master Qing died in Jade Ripple Pool. The saintess succeeded as the cult master and slaughtered so many practitioners of Tao sect and the righteous paths that they were left terrified. In the end, she exhausted her powers and died after passing down the position. How does Heavenly Saint Cult refer to these 3 cult masters?" Qin Mu said with an apathetic face, 3 kings. 3 kings. Pan Gong Tso thought about it, then praised, "They are indeed worthy to be called 3 kings. Now you should know the relationship between me and Heavenly Saint Cult, right? You should also know where my 80% confidence had come from, right? However, that was a day ago. Facing you now, I'm 100% confident in my victory. You don't even have a 10% chance of winning." Qin Mu rose and stretched his body. "Let's go. I feel like killing people now." Pan Gongtso rose and the two of them walked out side by side. Pan Gongtso turned back to instruct the 2 great shamans. "Leave the dishes here, then warm them up. I'll be back soon. Tip you." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 277. Tempo. Qin Mu and Pan Gongtso walked out side by side and left Jade Fragrance Floor, walking out of the city while following the street. The capital city in the early spring was still pretty chilly, and even in the noon, the sun wasn't very high up. It was located in the southern part of the sky and wasn't dazzling in the least. The capital city was still pretty bustling in the spring while people coming and going. Some young masters and young ladies of wealthy families would form companionship to walk around, and their clothes were mainly sable fur coats. Wearing these fluffy coats, it would serve as a contrast to make their fair skin stands out more. Using during this season, numerous wealthy families would already have boarded flying ships to head to the south to get through the winter, only coming back when spring was turning into summer. However, it was different this year. The natural disaster had caused the south to be as cold as the north and perhaps even colder. Therefore, most of the people still chose to remain in the north. After all, there were all kinds of natural and man-made disasters out there, so it would be better to stay safe in the capital city. Qin Mu and Pan Gongtso walked very slowly as both of them were adjusting their state. Pan Gongtso was no doubt a capable person that had reincarnated 19 lifetimes and lived 20 lifetimes. He soon adjusted his essence, qi, and spirit to their peak while Qin Mu was still slowly adjusting. Murderous intent started to pour out of Pan Gongtso and was targeted at Qin Mu as he slowly quickened his footsteps. His murderous intent was directed at Qin Mu to make him react, having no choice but to change his walking posture so as to not reveal a mistake. In Imperial College, Qin Mu had aimed him in this way as well to force him to hobble as he walked, borrowing the bending of his body to not reveal any mistake in his action so that Qin Mu couldn't take advantage of him. Now, he was giving him a taste of his own medicine, using his peak performance and aura to pressure Qin Mu, forcing Qin Mu to follow his tempo, to change along with the change of his aura. As long as Qin Mu had no choice but to follow his tempo, he would be able to hold the right to be active, causing Qin Mu to fall into a passive state, becoming weary from dealing with him. To avoid revealing a mistake, Qin Mu would continuously change his trajectory and change his aura. The longer the road he took, the more changes there would be. In the end, the number of changes will surpass the horizons and knowledge of this youth, making him unable to change his trajectory anymore. When they reached the outskirts of the city, killing Qin Mu would just become a matter of 1 or 2 moves. Old fox. Qin Mu had a grave expression. This was a very terrifying existence. Pan Gongtso was such a terrifying person. No matter if he was stronger than his opponent, he would immediately grab the upper hand if it was right in front of him, magnifying his superiority as much as he could. After 10,000 years of polishing, he was already rarely moved by external matters. Every word and every action moved according to the experience he had accumulated over the past 10,000 years, and his experience was like runes and reasons, deeply imprinted in his moves and actions. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Blind had both said before, to apply knowledge and action as one. Old Ma had also said to abide by the rules. With the accumulation of 10,000 years, Pan Gongtso had managed to achieve this step. As for applying knowledge and action as one, Qin Mu had his own understanding. Not taking action according to your knowledge, that's insincerity. Not succeeding after taking action, that's incapability. Taking action because of knowledge, that's the heart of utter sincerity. Succeeding in your action, that's carrying out to the end. At this point, it would already be difficult for one to be influenced by other people and incidents. And the prerequisite of applying knowledge and action as one was pursuing knowledge to the end. To study the underlying principle of a matter and turn it into one's own knowledge. For example, cooking. To perfect the craft of cooking so there's nothing to be picky in regards to the color, fragrance, and taste. For example, construction. to construct buildings and pavilions to be sturdy, beautiful, and useful, being able to look magnificent and not crumble under storms or earthquakes. For example, shipbuilding. To fully understand the principle of building a ship, using sturdy materials and not sinking when facing wind and waves. This was pursuing knowledge to the end. To study one thing or one matter to its extreme, understanding all the principles behind it. When one managed to pursue knowledge to the end, could one apply knowledge and action as one. Pan Gong Tso was such a person. Reincarnating over and over again, he had studying all kinds of techniques to their extremes, and all the knowledge he had learned had become his foundation, becoming a part of his words and actions. Every action and word from him held deep significance, and even from the start where Qin Mu had met him, Qin Mu was already brought into his tempo. From Qin Mu's provocation outside Hall of Six Directions and all the way to chatting with Pan Gong Tso in Jade Fragrance Floor was all a web weaved by him. A huge web that was methodically weaved to trap Qin Mu within. Now, as they walked out of the city, it was the spider pulling back its web while spitting silk on Qin Mu's body, coiling around Qin Mu and binding him. This made the space which Qin Mu could move around in becoming smaller and smaller. When they were out of the city, it would be the time for the huge spider to spit its venom to poison its prey. Qin Mu had never seen such a terrifying opponent before. No matter if it was Daozi or Fozi, or even those great experts of Celestial Being Realm and Life and Death Realm that had chased after his life, they were all much inferior compared to Pan Gong Tso. Now, Qin Mu was already forced to hobble as he walked, leaning unsteadily from side to side. Meanwhile, Pan Gong Tso was walking more and more steadily. He was forcing Qin Mu to show all his changes so as to not show his mistake. When Qin Mu exhausted all his changes, it would be the death of Qin Mu. To be able to clash with such a terrifying existence is a huge opportunity. Qin Mu's footsteps suddenly stopped, and in that instant where he had stopped, hundreds of mistakes appeared on his body. Could be said that there were mistakes all over his body. Pan Gong Tso was slightly stunned and also stopped in his footsteps. In this instant, he had the urge to make a move. With mistakes all over Qin Mu's body, these were all fatal mistakes that could take Qin Mu's life with one strike in Pan Gong Tso's eyes. However, he hesitated for an instant. Qin Mu was the Heavenly Devil Cult Master, and Heavenly Devil Cult Master has an extremely huge power, the #1 sect in the secular world. If he was to kill Qin Mu here, it was difficult for him to escape the revenge of Heavenly Devil Cult. In this instant where he hesitated, all of the mistakes on Qin Mu's body vanished and his aura suddenly burst forth, releasing his murderous intent which overwhelmed Pan Gong Tso as he raised his leg to walk forward. Pan Gong Tso's expression sank and had no choice to catch up with him, sinking into a passive state. Qin Mu made use of his hesitation to free himself from the disadvantageous situation. This was indeed out of his expectation. Even though it was evident that this youth's experience was inferior to him, he had a kind of acute spirit that was long obliterated in him. After reincarnating so many times, that acute determination to improve in his first lifetime had slowly been obliterated under the endless passage of time through lifetime after lifetime. Now, he had once again seen this kind of essence, chi, and spirit from Qin Mu. Now, it was his turn to be suppressed by Qin Mu and forced to walk forward in accordance to Qin Mu's tempo. The body techniques and auras of these two people changed continuously, and each change was very fine. However, as they walked more and more, the swaying of Pan Gong Tso's body became wider and wider, making him look like a drunk man that was leaning from side to side, catching the attention of many people. The situation now seemed like Qin Mu was using an invisible rope to lead a 13 to 14 years old drunk child to walk on the street. The battle of experts was just like this. Especially when the difference between the both of them was not huge, any carelessness would result in a reversal of situation. Qin Mu made use of his mental state in not daring to make a move on him in the city to reverse the situation. Even though the two people had yet to exchange blows, they have already started to clash using their wisdom. Even if the situation was reversed, Qin Mu still didn't let his guard down. It was as Pan Gong Tso had said, Qin Mu had no time to strengthen his Six Directions realm. Even though he had entered Six Directions realm at the same time as Pan Gong Tso was different from him. Pan Gong Tso had the experience of 20 lifetimes and had broken through 6 directions realm 20 times. In just a day, Pan Gong Tso had enough time to strengthen this realm and mobilize the power that could be mobilized in this realm. On the other hand, Qin Mu had to spend time to familiarize and figure his way around in order to control the power in this realm. The most crucial point was that he had no time now to cultivate his 6-direction realm. He already had the circulation diagram of 6-direction realm and 7 stars realm. One of obtained from the first hall in Imperial College, while the circulation diagram of 7 stars realm was inscribed on a stone tablet in Roland's Golden Palace. However, for him to comprehend Unity Technique, he needed to fuse Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique and great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures, and it was impossible for Pan Gong Tso to give him time to fuse his techniques. Qin Mu's mind delved into his 6 directions divine treasure, and in this divine treasure, he saw his spirit embryo. He then saw the 5-element stars and shrine in the sky, sensing his 5-element star sovereigns. From this angle of the spirit embryo, he could see the 4 sides of heaven and earth. It was evident after entering 6 directions realm, it was required for him to combine these 3 great divine treasures as one. His technique had to pass through all 3 great divine treasures to form one whole body. In his 6 directions divine treasure, there were 4 sides of heaven and earth, strengthening his magic power to be able to execute divine arts. This was a qualitative leap, but since he didn't have the circulation diagram of 6 directions realm for Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique, it would be his greatest shortcoming. Finally, the two of them walked out of the capital city and came to the outskirts of the city. The extent of Pan Gong Tso's movement as he was walking became more and more exaggerated as he staggered along. However, the changes in his body motions and techniques were still endless as he maintained a perfect state that didn't have any mistake. Qin Mu couldn't help admiring him. As they walked from the center of the city to the outskirts of the city, just the body techniques alone had gone through dozens of changes from Pan Gong Tso. Each and every kind of body technique was extremely intricate and cultivated to their extremes. He moved forward using the form of a dragon and really looked like a true dragon moving on the land. When he moved like a tiger, he gave off a feeling like he was a fierce tiger. When he executed the body technique of a phoenix, he was flying low like a phoenix. When he executed the body technique of a swimming fish, he was like a fish swimming against the current. It was hard to imagine how a person could cultivate so many body techniques to the extreme. 2 of them moved further and further, and their murderous intents grew thicker and thicker. From Qin Mu's Taotai sack, a sword pellet flew out along with Junior Protector Sword, hanging on his waist. Meanwhile, the 2 pigs slaughtering knives on Qin Mu's back dropped off, and the 2 knives stabbed into the ground one after another, showing only the knives' handles. The 2 knives were over 30 yards apart. His bamboo cane stabbed onto the ground while his iron hammer landed on the ground. From his sleeves, his brush, ink, papers, and inkstone also slid out and got thrown onto the ground as he was walking. As he was walking, his body trembled and heavy chunks of iron fell off from the front and the back of his chest. The iron boots on his feet suddenly exploded and the iron weights strapped on his legs also fell off. His body became light and his bones crackled and rattled. His aura had actually once again risen like the tide. Pan Gong Tso still continued moving along with his tempo. Qin Mu raising his aura had brought him an even larger pressure, but he was still able to endure and didn't reveal any slight mistake. The grasses on the grassland far away had already grown out, and there were numerous couples stepping on the greenery as they formed companionships to go on a spring outing. Some children were flying kites and running happily on the grassland. Some young men were showing off their body techniques as they rose into the sky with a few steps, stepping on the kites in the air, arousing the girls below to exclaim in admiration. The exclaims of admiration gradually lessened as the people started to look at the 2 strange youths, which were Qin Mu and Pan Gong Tso. The flock of birds in the forest flapped upwards and moved far away to avoid them. The murderous intents from these 2 youths had astonished them. As Qin Mu and Pan Gong Tso walked to the side of Mud River, and suddenly there were countless of huge fishes jumping out of the water, flopping on the surface of the river to escape towards the heart of the river, making the river extraordinary bustling. The instant these fishes and birds jumped and flew up, a child suddenly closed his eyes and opened his mouth wide to bawl loudly. Amidst the cries, Qin Mu and Pan Gongzhou, who were beside the river, unleashed their moves at practically the same time. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 278. Warm the Wine. All kinds of runes from Buddhist scriptures appeared around Qin Mu's body and revolved like a huge bell covering him. The five heavens from Rulai's Mahayana Sutra took shape as Buddha voice surrounded him. At the same time, he activated 9 Dragon Monarch technique, and the dragon chi came swarming from the 9 huge dragon veins surrounding the capital city, raising his aura once again. 9 Dragon Monarch technique was the supreme art of the imperial family and had been taught to him by Emperor Yanfeng personally. Under Qin Mu's execution, the dragon chi pouring out from the 9 dragon veins materialized and even entered the river water, causing dragons to fly out of the river while surging towards Qin Mu. He took the first strike. At this point, no matter if Pan Gongzhou revealed any mistake or not, he would be crushed by Qin Mu's abnormally dense vital chi that could suppress all kinds of intricate moves. Pan Gongzhou would be overwhelmed by an incomparable strength. The best method to deal with Pan Gongzhou was to use magic power to overwhelm him and not compete with him in moves. Boom! The river water exploded and flooded into the sky, transforming into the form of a huge Buddha that was over 30 yards tall, which and stood like a water mountain on the river. Water dragons coiled around this huge Buddha, and its 5 fingers were like 5 mountains rushing down at Pan Gongzhou. The 9 dragons let out angry roars as 9 Dragons Monarch technique fused with Tempest of the 9 dragons from Thunderclap 8 strikes. This strike showed the vastness of Buddhism's divine arts and the invincibility of the imperial family. The 9 dragons pounced on their target. Bang, bang, bang. The speed of the streams surpassed the speed of sound, and they exploded with thunderous bangs, facing nothing they couldn't destroy. What's divine art? This is divine art. Qin Mu's strongest point was his magic power, which surpassed that of his peers by several times. Even the old monsters like Village Chief were much inferior to him on the same realm. This kind of magic power was something Pan Gongzhou had no hope of matching. That's why Qin Mu wanted to use his absolute strength to overwhelm Pan Gongzhou, turning all of his 11,000 years of cultivation useless. At the instant Qin Mu's attack was about to burst forth, Pan Gongzhou's counter also arrived. What he used was a sword pellet that was the size of a thumb, and resplendent sword lights burst forth from within it. The second writing from the 14 writings of Tao Sword, binding of 5 chi and 3 eons, rising on the spot, cloud chariots crossing. He used the ultimate art of Tao Sect straightaway, using the purest pre-celestial supreme mystery technique to execute the second sword of Tao Sword. The sword lights contained wood, fire, earth, gold, and water, which are the 5 chi, heaven aeon, earth aeon, water aeon, as well as the 3 aeon. Heaven aeon was akin to the sun and called Supreme Yang, water aeon was akin to the moon, which was called Supreme Yin, while earth aeon was the neutralization. Once he executed this sword skill, the sword lights constructed the ideal world of Tao Sect, one with a sword sun, sword moon, sword earth, and the invigoration of the 5 chi. The sword skills of Tao Sect required extremely high attainments in algebra and used it as their foundation. They believed that all the great Tao in the heaven and earth could be answered using algebra. This was their path of 1 produces 2, 2 produce 3, and 3 produce all things. In their eyes, numerals construct everything in the world. Even if it were life forms or something else, it was all the same. Everything was ultimately just wonderful numerals. This was why Tao Sect had created a circular Wuji diagram, the Taiji diagram that separates yin and yang, and also the 4 symbols diagram, 8 trigrams, 64 hexagrams, to calculate the great Tao and all things of the heaven and earth. And when these became sword skills, they would form pictures and be in operation continuously, evolving all living things in the world and achieving magnificent power. Tao Sect's 14 writings of Tao Sword contained an ideal world in each writing. They were beautiful pictures developed from algebra, interpreting the marvel of heaven and earth. This was the biggest difference between Tao Sect and Buddhism. Tao Sect was the school of maths and Buddhism was the school of mind. The disciples of Tao Sect often joked about it among themselves. Your math isn't good? What are you cultivating for then? It's better to go home earlier to carry your baby. The divine arts of the two people collided. One was a sword skill divine art, while the other was a corporeal body divine art and a spell divine art. When they collided, it was a terrifying sight. The surface of the river trembled, and water floated up into the sky. More than that, the ground trembled as well, resulting in a minor shake. The impact of the aftermath caused fine jets of water to pierce through the willows beside the river, while the sword Qi stabbed into the rocks, creating numerous holes in the reefs by the shore. The world-shaking strike from Qin Mu rushed into the ideal world of Dao sect formed by Pangong Tso's sword lights, and the overwhelming power got broken down by the mathematics contained in the sword lights. In Pangong Tso's sword skill, something as boring as algebra could be enchanting and resplendent. Among the enchanting sword lights, the 9 water dragons and water Buddha rapidly crumbled, unable to withstand a single blow from the second move of Dao sword. Countless sword lights flew and struck the Buddha rays, which had transformed into a huge bell around Qin Mu. Ripples appeared on the surface of the bell, and in the next instant, the huge bell was destroyed. Qin Mu had no change in expression as his sword pellet landed into his hand. In an instant, the sword lights from inside the pellet burst forth. Qin Mu didn't use sword treading mountains and rivers, but went straight to the second move of sword picture. Whoosh! One side of Mud River turned scarlet, and blood-red sword lights poured forward like a huge sea. Among them, there seemed to be an emperor god rising up, pointing his sword at his enemies while looking disdainfully at everything out of the corner of his eye. Sword of founding Emperor Sea of Blood. Dao sword and sword picture collided, and Pangong Tso gave a grunt. The 5 Qi and 3 Ians were instantly destroyed as matchless sword lights came bombarding his face with exceptional killing intent. His body rose into the sky and soared like a brave dragon, executing marvelous body technique. It changed continuously like swimming fish, flying sparrows, and 9 phoenixes, but he still couldn't avoid all of the sword lights. Chi, chi, chi. Crimson lights emanated from his body as he leaped around, landing on the surface of the river and exploding the water in all directions. Whoosh! Qin Mu leaped up, and the sword lights in his hand vanished. The sword pellet transformed into a huge knife and sliced apart the river surface. Pangong Tso swung his sword pellet to receive this blow only to hear a series of bangs. He tumbled 6 to 7 times on the river surface like a skipping stone that a child had thrown before stopping his momentum. On the other side, Qin Mu sprinted over while stepping on the river surface, and every time his feet landed on the river's surface, there was a huge explosion, splattering water in all directions. Before Pangong Tso could even land on his feet, Qin Mu had already sprinted several hundred yards forward. The huge knife suddenly pulled back and covered his fist like flowing water. Qin Mu gave a punch. Boom! The river surface trembled as water dragons glowing with a green light roared in anger and drowned out Pangong Tso, who was dozens of yards away. The river surface became incomparably bustling in a split second. 45 dragons flew out from the punch and merged with the river water as they rushed towards Pangong Tso, resulting in endless loud bangs. Qin Mu leaped into the sky while stretching his 10 fingers out. With his palms facing the sky, he pulled downwards and bolts of lightning lighted up the river surface. Those bolts of lightning gathered together as they struck in the center of the 45 dragons. As Qin Mu was coming down, the sword pellet in his hand changed into countless sword lights, sword treading mountains and rivers. The sword lights transformed into vast mountains and rivers that descended from the sky. They crashed into the water, breaking the surface and splitting the river in a radius of a dozen yards. The water that had risen was then separated into droplets that formed mountains in the river. Underneath, blood sprayed out as a figure escaped toward the bottom of the river. Qin Mu raised his hand, and his junior protector sword that was on his waist flew out with a hum. His index finger revolved, and junior protector sword spun frantically. Sword Qi surrounded it as it used drill sword form, breaking apart the water to shoot straight to the bottom of the river, chasing the trail of blood. Qin Mu's shirt fluttered as he gently floated down from the sky and stepped on the river's surface, which was billowing with waves. The sound of waves crashing against themselves came from behind him, and it was something from when he was sprinting over. The waves were raised into midair and only landed down now, flying up and dispersing like fine jade. On the river's surface, Qin Mu changed his footsteps, and the river's surface around his feet instantly changed. The water whirled around him as if there were transparent flood dragons surrounding him, forming a huge circle. Zu! Junior Protector's sword flew out from the river surface, continuing to spin the air. However, it was gradually slowing down. When it came in front of Qin Mu, it had already stopped spinning. The sword sheath on Qin Mu's waist flew out, transforming into a fish dragon, and swallowed the sword with its huge mouth before returning to his waist as a sword sheath. Qin Mu's expression remained calm as usual while he stood quietly. The sword pellet flew out from his hand and hovered in front of him, looking like a slightly larger water droplet. In his surroundings, streams of water were slowly rising into the sky as though the rain was falling in the other direction. The river water that rose into the sky turned into water vapor, forming clouds that covered a radius of dozens of yards. Flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder came from the clouds. As the lightning flashed from time to time, scales and claws could be faintly seen. Pan Gong Tso, you have disappointed me. Qin Mu's calm voice traveled over the river's surface as he spoke indifferently. Does the cultivation of your 19 lifetimes only amounts to this? Why don't you dare to come out? I'm waiting to kill you so I can go back to continue my meal. After all, the dishes are going to turn cold soon. There was no movement on the river's surface. Qin Mu frowned and turned around to walk back to the shore. As he walked back through the same route he had taken earlier, astonished faces were all around him as the people turned their heads to look at him. Tourists followed him with their gazes as he walked away. Qin Mu ignored them and picked up the brush, ink, papers, and inkstone he had thrown out before noticing the iron hammer. He stretched his hand to grab the handle of the hammer and suddenly raised it to give a powerful slam on the ground. With a loud boom, the air in front of him was compressed to become a wall which soon crumbled to pieces. With this smash on the ground, the earth sunk and split open. Tremors came from underground as a figure moved away rapidly. Qin Mu leaped forward as if he was flying and came to the bamboo cane at the next instant. With a smack of his palm, the bamboo cane shot down into the ground and blood spurted out from the small hole it had made. Qin Mu leaped a few more times and came to the front of the two pig slaughtering knives. With his head below and legs above, his hands grabbed onto the handles of the knives. As he spun with them, countless knife lights sliced into the earth. His body moved forward, and he spun while the knife lights continued slashing into the earth like rain and waterfall. Suddenly, Qin Mu opened up his legs and slammed the ground with the backs of his knives. He flipped in the air before landing steadily on his feet. Sheathing his knives behind him, he turned around and walked into the capital city. Soon after that, he came to Jade Fragrance Floor and walked into Green Bamboo Garden, coming to the private room after taking 2 turns around the statue of Bodhisattva of Compassion. The 2 great shamans were still in the private room and revealed astonishment when they saw him. Are the dishes still warm? Qin Mu asked. One of the great shamans looked at him in a daze while the other nodded immediately. What about the wine? The wine has turned slightly cold. Qin Mu waved his hand and said, Go warm it up and serve it to me. You, stay behind to pour it for me. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 279. Poison in the Wine. After a moment, the great shaman that went to warm the wine came back. The other great shaman swirled the wine, and when it was clear, he poured a bowl and placed it respectfully in front of Qin Mu. Is it poisoned? Qin Mu asked with a pleasant expression. The 2 great shamans from Roland's Golden Palace immediately said, We don't dare. Qin Mu laughed out loud. I'm a divine physician who has learned from Jade Face Poison King. If you guys try to play poison in front of me, that would be quite a joke. The 2 great shamans laughed with him. Qin Mu's expression sunk and pointed at the great shaman who had warmed the wine. Drink it. The expression of that great shaman changed drastically, and he started trembling. Qin Mu's face turned even darker, and he repeated coldly, Drink it! The corners of the great shaman's eyes twitched as he picked up the wine bowl with trembling hands to drink 2 mouthfuls. He smiled. No poison. As he said this, His body trembled and shriveled up like a deflated balloon. He became thinner and thinner until only his skin was left. Covering the skin was his clothes, and there seemed to be things wiggling in them. A bunch of insects chewed through his skin and flooded out, crawling in all directions. They then incinerated and turned into ashes. The face of the other great shaman turned ashen. Without a change in expression, Qin Mu rapped the table. "Serve me another bowl." The great shaman serving the wine had a tearful expression as he said, "There's poison in the wine. Can't poison me," Qin Mu said indifferently. "Continue serving the wine. Where are the dancers? Call them." Songs and dances liven up the mood. The great shaman immediately poured a bowl of wine and summoned the dancers, continuing with the dance and music. Qin Mu ate the dishes and drank the wine as he enjoyed the songs and dances, clapping when he was entertained. This banquet lasted for quite a long time, and the sun was hanging late in the west when he waved his hand and made the singers and dancers fall back. The wine was highly toxic and contained a kind of shamanic poison. It had venomous insects that specialized in eating souls and corporeal bodies. However, Qin Mu was still fine after drinking nearly the entire jar of wine. Such a disappointment. Qin Mu rose, leaving the table in a mess. All the food and wine had been eaten and drunk by him, and it was more than even a dozen lords would have been able to eat. However, he didn't seem full as all the wine and food had been dissolved by spirit-returning pill great supplement technique. "You've lived through so many lifetimes, 11,000 years. What a pity that you never took your own path, always liking the path of others, jumping from one to another. After jumping here and there, you obliterated your own acute spirit." Qin Mu shook his head. "I waited so long for you, yet you still don't dare to show up. What a joke. I thought you would be my opponent, but I didn't count that the older you get, the more cowardly you get. After I took the upper hand, you didn't dare to pick another fight with me again." The great shaman from Roland's Golden Palace was unable to make heads or tails of what he was saying, not knowing who he was talking to. What's the need for dreams when one doesn't dare to struggle? Qin Mu walked outside and chuckled. "It's better for you to just go home. That's right, since it's your treat. Foot the bill before leaving." He walked out of Jade Fragrance Floor and left. In Green Bamboo Garden, the great shaman was befuddled and waved his hand to dismiss the singers and dancers. After a moment, Pangong Tso walked out from the shadows with a gloomy face while stained in blood. "The sword skills of human emperor," he said in a low voice. Those were actually the sword skills of human emperor. Even though it could have been a deception, I don't think I saw it wrong. What that junior used were the sword skills of that human emperor, which were fused with Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword skills, as well as Rulai's Mahayana Sutra combined with Nine Dragons' monarch technique of Ling family. He had combined all these techniques. Qin Mu had fused so many techniques and divine arts together, and they were all top-notch techniques and divine arts. So Pangong Tso's Dao sword had been countered when they exchanged moves, messing up his mind and plans. Therefore, he no longer dared to fight head-on with Qin Mu. He didn't know how many moves of the human emperor's sword skills he had learned. The human emperor of the previous generation was an extremely strong practitioner, so he didn't dare to take the risk. In the previous generation, many incidents happened and there were many figures that were close to gods walking around in the world. He was one of them. Heaven Knife was also one of them. Other than them, they were numerous other glorious figures, but none of them were as dazzling. Human Emperor was the most dazzling star in the previous generation. Other than him, Pangong Tso had seen another human emperor, one of the generation prior to that man's. It was some 800 years back. The human emperors had appeared in his long life again and again, and every one of them was abnormally dazzling, overshadowing his radiance. Various human emperors could be traced even all the way back to his first lifetime and even before that. There were human emperors walking in the world since a very long time ago. He was once curious about this incomparably ancient inheritance. The techniques and divine arts of every human emperor were different, and every one of them was absolutely astonishing. There were even quite a number of saints that appeared once every 500 years that ended up as human emperors. He had wanted to get in touch with this inheritance, But since he died a few times under the hands of human emperors, he vanquished this thought. And right then, he saw the inheritance of the previous generation's human emperor in Qin Mu's skills. The previous generation's human emperor had vanished for a long time, and rumors said that he's been dead for 300 to 400 years. Pan Gongzhou had seen the sword of this human emperor before and knew that he was one of the strongest people in the previous generation. He was the strongest sword. After seeing it once, the sword light would be forever imprinted in one's heart, making them unable to forget it. If not for that, Pan Gongzhou would have never panicked and messed up, getting heavily injured by Qin Mu and losing the upper hands and escaping into the river. He had then went into the ground. But the youth's green heaven's eyes discovered him, and he used his bamboo cane, iron hammer, and pig-slaughtering knives to land fatal blows on him, adding injuries on top of injuries. Because of that, there was no way for him to turn back. His attainments in escaping arts had been cultivated to their extreme. The escaping skills of Little Jade Capital were definitely the first-rate escaping arts in this world. His soul was extremely strong and close to the level of God, so Qin Mu wouldn't be able to kill him. In addition, the cultivation of his previous lifetime was still in his body. Even though this body was very weak and couldn't withstand such terrifying strength, it wasn't everything. If Qin Mu forced him to his limits, the explosion of his power would be enough to kill the youth. After he escaped, Qin Mu knew he couldn't make him stay and so didn't chase after him. Instead, he went back to Jade Fragrance Floor and forced him to not dare to reveal himself, delaying him curing his injuries. If that ancient organization learned that the human emperor is not yet dead and still has a successor, things will definitely get bustling. Pan Gongzhou muttered in a low voice. The great shaman that had served Qin Mu wine immediately went forward and smiled. "Prince, how are your injuries?" Cult Master Qin had not paid just now. "I don't need anyone to know I lost, even though I've lost many times." The great shaman was slightly stunned and suddenly felt his soul becoming stiff as if something had chained it up. He couldn't help revealing fear. The next moment, his flesh and bones melted and his soul disintegrated, leaving a pile of clothes on the ground. Pan Gongzhou walked out and footed the bill while thinking to himself, "Luckily I met that organization quite a few times and know how to contact them. I'm afraid that I won't be able to stay in the capital city anymore. This cult master Qin will definitely inform Chancellor Bashan when he goes back and not let me have a place to fit in. However, if I want to hide, Chancellor Bashan won't be able to find me." He walked out of Jade Fragrance Floor and into the shadows, never appearing again. Qin Mu returned to Imperial College and found Chancellor Bashan. "Pan Gongzhou is indeed the old monster of Roland's Golden Palace. I injured him, so I'm afraid he won't appear again." Chancellor Bashan was startled and cried out, "He left? If he cast a spell on you in secret, how bad would that be?" Teacher Heaven Knife didn't manage to kill him and had no choice but to hide his name. "What about you then?" The brat's cultivation is still in 6 Directions realm, but soon enough he will break through into 7 Stars realm, then Life and Death realm. With only 10 or so years, I'm afraid he'll return back to Divine Bridge realm. At that time you'll be dead meat. Qin Mu smiled. "Why doesn't senior brother stay by my side? That way he won't dare to make a move." Chancellor Bashan frowned and said, "He knows my name and will be able to kill me 10 years later as well. It won't do. I can only solve the problem temporarily by staying at your side. I need to find and kill him to prevent further troubles." When he was done, he summoned the Green Bull to leave in a hurry. Qin Mu returned to Scholar's residence. While looking at his room, a sense of dread washed over him. If Chancellor Bashan doesn't find Pan Gongzhou, won't that brat stare at me every night? How will I be able to sleep like that? It simply won't do. I have to find that guy. This matter should be better if it was handled by the disciples of Heavenly Saint Cult. Unless he went back to Roland's Golden Palace to hide, he won't be able to escape my eyes and ears. Just as he thought this, a steward from Scholar's residence walked over and said, "Academician Qin is already a divine arts practitioner. You should be moving to divine arts residence." There were other stewards helping Chun Wanyun and Si Yunxiang to move as well while saying, "You have also succeeded in breaking the wall, so must also leave Scholar's residence to move to divine arts residence." Chen Wanyun and Si Yunxiang saw Qin Mu and came over in a hurry to thank him. They said, "If not for Cult Master's Six Directions computational canon, we wouldn't have been able to enter Six Directions realm so fast." "It was just a little thing," Qin Mu said humbly. Chen Wanyun had a weird expression, and Si Yunxiang suffered a setback. To Qin Mu it was a little thing, but to them it was a huge help. Like this, did she still have hope to get rid of this cult master to become the female cult master of Heavenly Saint Cult? Scholars' residence. "I'm leaving." Chen Wanyun waved to the scholars that had come to send him off and smiled. "Whoever is willing to be the big brother can go fight for the role themselves." Yu Qinghong and Monk Yun Ke had no interest in that as they looked at each other before smiling. "You guys can go to Divine Arts residence first. We'll be there in 2 days. This position of the big brother should be handed to the other junior brothers and sisters." Qin Mu and the rest walked towards Divine Arts residence while the dragon Qilin followed behind them. This lazy dragon was determined to follow Qin Mu everywhere he went, never letting go of this meal master. "That's right." Qin Mu recalled something and smiled. "The Crown Prince will be leaving the capital city in a few days' time, and he wants me to follow him to send disaster relief. If you guys are free, you can follow me to gain some experience. Wanyun, you have already become a divine arts practitioner and your abilities aren't weak anymore. So you'll be able to become the incense master of our sacred cult with another few more years of experience." Chen Wanyun felt his scalp crawling and became unwilling to follow him out. He said, "Every time we go out with Cult Master, danger always springs up all around and we are always escaping for our lives. I think I'd rather not go. I just cultivated to Six Directions realm, so I still have to strengthen this realm." Si Yunxiang's eyes glowed brightly. "I'll go." Just as Qin Mu wanted to say something, another steward from Divine Arts residence came over and said, "Scholar Chen Wanyun, the Crown Prince has appointed you to follow him out of the capital city. Other than you, there are a dozen more scholars from Divine Arts residence that will be coming as well." Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 280. Superlative Craftsmanship. Chen Wanyun's face immediately turned bitter. Going out with Qin Mu to gain experience was definitely a chore. The last time they had gone to the southern borders for experience with Qin Mu, they had encountered Nine Spectres sect, Corpse Immortal cult, and Great Mountain sect summoning the dead to massacre a city. Then they encountered Dutian Devil King wrecking everything in Heaven Wave City before going to Daxiang City to join the battle to quell the rebellion. Chen Weiyang had never been through so many near-death encounters in his entire life. After returning to the capital city, he had spent quite a long time to recover from the ordeals. When he went to Qingmen Pass for experience, he fought fiercely with soldiers from Barbarian D Empire, but that was still soldiers fighting soldiers and general fighting generals. In no way was it similar to gaining experience with Qin Mu. When out with him, sects would wage wars against each other and even summon devil gods. Upon reaching Daxiang City, there were even strong practitioners of cult master level everywhere, with hundreds of strong practitioners of celestial being realm and life and death realm as well. When Chen Wanyun recalled the incidents he experienced with Qin Mu, he couldn't help shivering. He had also heard about the encounters Qin Mu had faced after that, how he was chased by countless experts when he went home to Great Ruins for New Year. He then stirred trouble in Great Thunderclap Monastery, and even got involved with Dao Sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery trying to murder the Emperor, saving both the Emperor and Imperial Preceptor before coming back to the capital to kill Crown Prince Ling Yuxia. If it was Chen Wanyun who was forced to experience all these incidents, he would have most likely already died 100 times. He was determined to never go out with Qin Mu again, but the Crown Prince actually ordered him to come. It was the same as receiving a death penalty and waiting to be executed. He didn't know if this sacred cult master was a jinx, causing disasters everywhere he went. Qin Mu saw that his expression wasn't too good and consoled him. "This journey won't be dangerous. Crown Prince Ling Yushu is from our Imperial College, so we're old friends, and we have a good relationship as well. He is leaving the capital city to bring disaster relief and is bringing many experts from the Ministry of Works. This journey isn't to quell any rebellion, but to check on all the factories and clear the snow mountains from the snow disaster. Or maybe it's to build bridges and dams. It's something along those lines, so there won't be any danger." Chen Wanyun had a bitter face as he said, I sure hope so. Si Yunxiang was slightly disappointed on the other hand. No danger. The three people followed the stewards to their respective rooms in Divine Arts residence. The stewards had arranged for them to live close to one another as their three houses were all lined up. Qin Mu said to Chen Wanyun and Si Yunxiang, I won't know for how long we will be away, so you guys should find some divine arts to cultivate. Chen Wanyun's gaze flickered, and he suggested, Yu Qinghong and Yun Ke will be breaking their walls in the 2 days and will become divine arts practitioners. Cult master, we should enjoy blessings and endure misfortune together, so we should bring them along to enjoy the blessings together. Qin Mu smiled and said, You're right. Before the crown prince leaves, we'll bring everyone who manages to cultivate divine arts. Chen Wanyun's spirit was roused, and he left with excitement as he thought to himself, If we're going to die, it's only natural that everyone should join in on the fun. Si Yunxiang blinked innocently and stretched a fair white palm in front of Qin Mu. He took out his book tablet and placed it in her hand. Si Yunxiang gave an elated cheer and immediately left. The book tablet of Divine Arts residence could only allow one to go to the second level of floor of heavenly records, while Qin Mu's book tablet could access the third level, so she borrowed his book tablet every time she wanted to go to floor of heavenly records. There was also Hall of Heavenly Works, which was similar to Heavenly Devil Cult's Craftsman Hall and Heavenly Works Hall. The latter one mostly researched how to manufacture mechanisms, refine spirit weapons, construct ships and bridges, pave roads, and manufacture vehicles. All of these were the works of the scholars from Hall of Heavenly Works. Imperial College was founded by Imperial Preceptor and Heavenly Devil Patriarch together. So many halls and teachings were copied from the halls of Heavenly Devil Cult. This was one of the reasons why Great Thunderclap Monastery, Dao Sect, and the rest of the righteous sects didn't really like Eternal Peace Empire. When the scholars of Hall of Heavenly Works graduated, they usually went to Ministry of Works to assume a position. This time, Crown Prince Ling Yushu brought mostly scholars from Heavenly Palace Courtyard, while the others were all officials from the Ministry of Works. Most of the officials from there came from Hall of Heavenly Works, so were considered classmates of Qin Mu and the rest. The government minister of the Ministry of Works had the greatest authority, while the next in line was the assistant minister. This position was assumed by Heavenly Devil Cult's Heavenly Works Hall Master. The Ministry of Works was then split into 4 departments. Department of Works managed the city and civil engineering. Department of Land managed the distribution and measurement of land. Department of Harvest managed the vegetables, fruits, and grains, while Department of Water managed the hydraulic engineering. Most of the ministers in these 4 departments were the hall masters and incense masters of Heavenly Devil Cult. Many of the officials were their disciples, while the other half were scholars that had graduated from Imperial College. Heavenly Devil Cult and Imperial College occupied nearly all of the official positions in the Ministry of Works. One needs to put what one studies into practice, so the people from Heavenly Works, Craftsman, Vegetable, Rain, Farmer Halls were all talents that the Ministry of Works needed. Because of that, they were all able to enter the Imperial Court. When Qin Mu saw the officials which Ling Yushu had brought, he couldn't help revealing a weird expression. Most of them were from his Heavenly Devil Cult. Chen Wanyun, Yu Qinghong, Yun Ke, Wei Yong, and Si Yunxiang hurried over. Chen Wanyun's face was badly bruised by them, but he had a very pleased expression. When Si Yunxiang saw the officials Ling Yushu had brought over, she also couldn't help revealing an astonished expression. She secretly asked Qin Mu, Cult Master, is the Crown Prince part of us as well? Qin Mu's heart was slightly moved, and he asked Ling Yushu, Your Highness, have you heard about Heavenly Saint Cult? Ling Yushu didn't reply to him and instead said, Everyone's here, so let us be on our way. The order Father has given me this time is to inspect the geography of all the prefectures in our empire, check the irrigation works, city defense, measure the soil, and check on the vegetables and fruits after the natural disaster. Once we reach a place, I'll be asking the officials questions while the rest of you will check on the hydrology, city defense, soil, and rations, verifying their words. All of the officials acknowledged his orders. Ling Yushu continued, No matter which prefecture we go to, if the hydrology or city defense needs adjustments, if the officials are taking over the land by force, or there are insufficient ration, all of these must be reported as they really are. The government minister of the Ministry of Works said, "Your Highness, the world is huge and there are so many prefectures. I'm afraid that it will take us 2-3 years to inspect everything." Ling Yushu smiled. "That's why I found a quick ship. It should be arriving soon. This ship is the fastest ship in our empire and it's called Cloud Chasing Ship. It's said to have superlative craftsmanship and you guys can take a look at its pill furnaces when we board the ship. They are very wonderful. Furthermore, it's still an iron shell ship." Many of the officials from the Ministry of Works had weird expressions as they coughed one after another. Some of them even looked at Qin Mu. Qin Mu also had a weird expression. The ship that the Crown Prince was describing seemed to be Fan Yunxiao's cloud-chasing pirate ship. Back then, Qin Mu had constructed 5 of such treasure ships, and 3 of the huge ships belonged to Heavenly Devil Cult. Regarding the 2 smaller ships, one belonged to Qin Mu while the other one was given to Fan Yunxiao. The ones that constructed the treasure ships were most of the officials from the Ministry of Works that were present here. Maybe the emperor of the next dynasty might just be a heavenly king or guardian of our heavenly saint cult. Qin Mu thought to himself leisurely. Crown Prince Yushu is really fated with our heavenly saint cult. Heavenly Works Hall Master said secretly to Qin Mu, "Cult Master? Incense Master Fan found me a few days ago, asking to change to a bigger ship, which left me bewildered. But now it seems that Incense Master Fan had been doing business with the Crown Prince." Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Ling Yushu waited for a moment and a flying ship with wooden grains slowly flew over. The ship gradually descended and stopped in front of the mountain gate of Imperial College. Fan Yunxiao and the rest of the bandits were dressed prim and proper as they stood on the bow of the ship respectfully. "Your Highness, Cult Master Sacred Teacher." Ling Yushu immediately turned around to look at Qin Mu. "Cult Master Qin, this ship is the property of your heavenly saint cult? How expensive! How black-hearted!" Qin Mu consoled him. "Your Highness might not know that they were bandits in the past and so are a little ruthless and lacking in conscience." Ling Yushu was startled. When everyone boarded the ship, an imperial scholar came running over at this moment and boarded the ship while saying, "I'm late." It was a charming young man. Ling Yushu immediately hurried forward and asked in a low voice, "Sister, why are you here?" That charming young man was none other than Ling Yushu dressed as a male. She smiled and said, "You didn't allow me to come, but I asked permission from father and he gave me permission to come. The one that herds cows." She threw Ling Yushu to one side and ran to Qin Mu's side. Her eyes curved up. "Do you recognize me?" Qin Mu hesitated for a moment. "Fat Sister Yushu." Ling Yushu's expression changed from anger into delight, and she punched him in the chest with a smile. "If you dare to say it, I'll kick you off the ship." Ling Yushu saw her punching Qin Mu in the chest and was aware that even though the punch seemed heavy, it was actually very light. He couldn't help grunting. This sister of his was starting to listen less and less to him. Si Yunxiang came to Qin Mu's side and looked at Ling Yushu. She gave her a smile and didn't say anything, lowering her head to play with the dragon Qilin. Ling Yushu looked at her back, and her gaze flickered. She said in a low voice, "The one that herds cows. Let me go change my outfit." Ling Yushu immediately hurried over and said, "Sister, male outfit is good. The male outfit is very good. You look especially good in it." "Really?" Ling Yushu nodded heavily. The flying ship rose into the sky and drove 300 miles to Auspicious Prefecture. This place was located down the river, 2,000 miles east of the East Sea. Ministry of Works had once constructed a huge bridge that crossed the river, stretching across the 20 miles of mud river. Hundreds of people looked down from the ship and saw that the center portion of the huge bridge was missing. There were numerous parts of the bridge floor and bridge pier missing, which should be due to the severe winter from the snow disaster freezing the river surface. This would have caused an ice mountain to form on the river and slid down, crashing into the huge bridge. With the torrential river water, the current was very swift, so fixing the bridge wouldn't be easy. The treasure ship descended in Auspicious Prefecture City, and the magistrate immediately came forward to welcome Ling Yushu. Ling Yushu said, "Magistrate, dispatch your divine arts practitioners to follow the assistant minister of Ministry of Works to fix the bridge." The magistrate immediately mobilized the divine arts practitioners in auspicious prefecture. Several hundred of them followed Heavenly Works Hall Master to the river surface. Qin Mu and the rest also came over. Just as they were thinking about how they were going to repair the bridge over such a rapid current, they saw Heavenly Works Hall Master give a shout to the divine arts practitioners behind him. His magic power poured out and the water of Mud River instantly rose upward, forming an arc in midair. The river continued flowing 5 to 6 miles in the air before landing back into the river. In the area of 5 to 6 miles, there was no river water nor any damp patches on the river bed. The water in the mud had been drained out by the hundreds of divine arts practitioners. Everyone smelt the stones to connect the bridge. Heavenly Works Hall Master gave an order and numerous divine arts practitioners with vermilion bird spirit body came forth. Great furnaces were propped up on the river bed and stones were thrown into the great furnace while fire birds flew around as the divine arts practitioners executed their divine arts to smelt the stone in the furnaces into lava. Then, another group of officials from Ministry of Works came forth to control the shape of the lava with their magic power, cooling the lava down into stone pillars. After a moment, stone pillars were erected upright from the river bed. Other officials from Ministry of Works came flying from a mountain at the side, transporting stones that were already sliced, laying them down orderly. 2 hours later, the huge bridge was reconnected. Qin Mu's heart trembled, and he exclaimed to himself, "This is a miracle, a superlative craftsmanship."